Welcome. As you settle in, perhaps reclining somewhere comfortable, let your mind drift. Back in time. Back before the noise of modern life, before electricity, before the glow of city lights. Picture a place where the air itself hums with ritual, commerce, and the quiet dread of the unknown. Tonight, we'll wander gently through the world of the Aztecs, a civilization grand, mysterious, and unyielding. Though their empire vanished centuries ago, the echoes of their daily lives, their rulers, and their rituals still reverberate beneath the foundations of modern Mexico City. We will begin our journey with the bustling, chaotic life of the Aztec marketplace, where ordinary people toiled under immense burdens, both physical and societal. From there, we will glide into the storied rise and tragic downfall of Moctezuma II, the emperor who stood at the precipice of an empire's doom. Later, we'll descend into the secrets beneath the ancient capital of Tenochtitlan, a city built upon a lake, whose submerged remnants continued to whisper tales of the past. And finally, we'll ascend to the refined halls of the Aztec elite, where nobles feasted under the watchful gaze of the cosmos. So close your eyes, or let your gaze soften. Feel the gentle pull of history as we step softly into a world both alien and familiar. Beginning now with a single day in the heart of an Aztec marketplace. Imagine the first faint glow of dawn barely touching the sky, its pale light reflecting softly on the surface of an ancient lake. The air is still cool, but already the city stirs. You awake not to the sound of birds, but to the low murmur of distant voices, merchants preparing for the day ahead. You are no merchant, Prince. No, you are among the countless porters and common sellers who must prepare their wares or their bodies to bear the wares of others. Your back is already sore from the previous day's burdens. There is no reprieve. Your home, perhaps no more than a single-room hut of woven reeds and mud, offers little comfort, but it is shelter enough. A thin blanket may have staved off the chill of night, but now it is time to rise. You eat a small, rough cake of maize. No spices, no meat. Just the simple, dense sustenance to carry you through the morning. Then, you shoulder your load. Baskets of goods lashed to your back with a thick strap that cuts across your forehead, a design both ingenious and unforgiving. This is the tump line, and it is your lifeline and your burden alike. With every step, the weight shifts and pulls a constant ache between your shoulders and your neck across your spine. You join the growing tide of people headed for Tlatelolco, the great market of the empire, the beating heart of commerce in Tenochtitlan. Imagine the sound building as you approach, voices bargaining, feet scuffing on packed earth, the dull thud of burdens being set down, the scent of crushed herbs, burning copal incense, and the sharp tang of human sweat blend into an aroma both enticing and oppressive. Tlatelolco is vast, a city within a city. Tens of thousands gather here, each with a purpose. Rows of stalls are demarcated not by signs but by tradition. You know where to find the traders in cacao beans, the sellers of salt, the makers of woven mats, the merchants hawking shimmering obsidian blades. But you, perhaps, carry nothing so precious. Perhaps you haul firewood, an essential commodity but a lowly one. Your earnings will be slim, barely enough to purchase simple maize, perhaps a few chili peppers, if you are lucky. Every coin earned is hard won. And still, every transaction must be precise. The Aztecs use a form of barter, yes, but cacao beans and small copper axes serve as currency. Miscount a handful of cacao, and you may face not just a scolding, but a public beating. For theft, even the suspicion of it, punishment is swift and brutal, often carried out publicly to deter others. As the sun climbs higher, the heat gathers. There's little shade among the tightly packed stalls, and the press of bodies only deepens the sweltering discomfort. The rhythm of your day is simple. Walk, carry, sweat, unload, repeat. You hear the distant sound of a conch shell being blown. A signal, perhaps, that a noble or high-ranking priest is arriving to inspect the market. Their arrival is a reminder that this is not just a place of trade. It is an arena of power and control, watched carefully by those above. And beneath it all, another shadow looms. The gods must be fed, and sacrifices are chosen. The The market is one of many places where captives are displayed, sold, or prepared for ritual. As you pass, you may see the painted face of a captive, their expression blank, their fate sealed. You do not stare for long. By the afternoon, exhaustion begins to set in. Your legs ache, the strap digs deeper. A splash of water, if you can afford it, refreshes you briefly. But the day is far from over. The market will not close until the sun begins to fall once again, and until then, you must endure. Because to fail, to collapse, to show weakness, is to invite poverty. And in a world where poverty can mean death, or even capture for sacrifice, that is not an option. As dusk approaches, the city takes on a golden hue. The market quiets, though the scent of food being grilled lingers. You retrace your steps home, your basket empty, your body heavy, and tomorrow you will rise and do it all again. Yet amidst the hardship, there is rhythm. The same paths walked, the same goods exchanged, the same prayers whispered, constant cycle, unchanging but for the whims of rulers and the gaze of the gods. Let us leave the market now, the hum of its commerce fading behind us. Let us ascend from the dusty avenues to the grand palaces, where one man stood above it all. A man whose story of power, pride, and downfall still lingers in the annals of history. Now, gently leave the clamor of the market behind, the noise receding as if you are walking up a long, winding causeway toward the very heart of the empire. There, at the center of Tenochtitlan, rises the Teocalli, the great temple, and beyond it, the imperial palace home to a man whose name still lingers in the echoes of history, Moctezuma II, or as many know him, Moctezuma II. Imagine the grandeur of his dwelling. Sprawling chambers, lush gardens, aviaries filled with exotic birds of every hue, and shimmering pools where fish dart like living jewels. Stone walls painted with intricate glyphs, floors swept clean by dozens of servants, and the quiet but ever-present murmur of courtiers, warriors, and priests attending to his needs. Moctezuma II was no ordinary ruler. He was the Tlatoani, the great speaker, an emperor chosen not merely for his lineage, but for his might, wisdom, and favor with the gods. Yet beneath the surface of his rule was a mind troubled by omens, visions, and an unyielding burden of responsibility. You might imagine him seated upon a low throne carved from dark wood, his face composed, but his eyes distant, as if seeing not just the walls of his palace, but something beyond them. Moctezuma had once been a warrior. He earned his place through campaigns of conquest, extending Aztec dominance far beyond the Valley of Mexico. Tribute flowed into his city: cacao, gold, precious feathers, and captives destined for sacrifice. He was both feared and revered, seen as the living intermediary between the mortal world and the divine. But power carried with it a certain solitude, and for Moctezuma, the signs in the skies and the tales brought by traders weighed heavily. Strange portents, comets blazing across the night, lakes that seemed to boil. The collapse of temple structures, all interpreted by his priests as warnings from the gods. And then, came news of foreign visitors. Pale-skinned men arriving on the coasts, clad in iron, riding animals no one had ever seen, horses, creatures as alien as the men themselves. Moctezuma was not a rash man. He was thoughtful, cautious, some would say hesitant. He sent gifts to these visitors, among them golden masks and ornate featherworks, in part to demonstrate wealth, but also, perhaps, or learn whether they were mortal, divine. The foreign leader was named, and his approach was slow but relentless, gathering allies among the many peoples who resented Aztec domination. All the while, Moctezuma watched, deliberated, and consulted his priests. Imagine the emperor pacing slowly through his palace gardens, the sound of trickling water nearby, the scent of blooming marigolds hanging heavy in the air, his mind turning over the same questions again and again. Were these men the return of Quetzalcoatl, the exiled god? Were they the harbingers of doom? When Court Urs and his small band arrived at the gates of Tenochtitlan, Moctezuma did not greet them with spears, but with open hands, an offering of diplomacy, a gesture interpreted by some as fear, by others as wisdom. He welcomed them into his palace, housed them with honor, perhaps believing that through hospitality he could disarm whatever power they held. Yet it was a delicate game, and one that would soon slip from his grasp. The Spaniards, armed with steel and gunpowder, but more decisively with cunning and local allies, took Moctezuma hostage within his own palace. Though still dressed in finery, though still called the emperor, his authority was eroding, thread by delicate thread. Some say Moctezuma tried to negotiate, tried to maintain balance, but his people grew restless. They saw their emperor not as a protector, but as a prisoner. One day, standing on the balcony of his palace, Moctezuma attempted to address his subjects. To restore calm, to remind them of their unity, stones were hurled, some say by rebels, others by accident, but a stone struck the emperor. His injuries, combined with mounting despair, proved fatal. Whether by his own hand, the hand of his captors, or the cruel hand of fate, Moctezuma died, a symbol of an empire beginning to fracture. And so, the mighty speaker was silenced. The palace that had echoed with his commands now stood grim and quiet, its walls no longer a seat of power, but a tomb of lost sovereignty. Outside, the city would soon know chaos, war, and devastation. The empire of the Aztecs, like the emperor himself, teetered and fell, undone by hubris, hesitation, and the arrival of an entirely foreign world. But beneath those stone streets, beneath the canals and causeways, deeper truths remained. The earth held its own records of rituals, of faith, of a civilization determined to leave its mark. And so, as we drift onward, we leave the shadow of the fallen emperor and descend deeper. To the buried secrets that lie under the heart of old Tenochtitlan, mysteries unearthed piece by piece. Let us descend now, not just in thought but in place, beneath the crowded streets and soaring towers of modern Mexico City, where the ancient capital of Tenochtitlan once stood proud and shimmering atop its lake. Beneath the asphalt and stone, below the din of traffic and the bustle of the present, lies a hidden world, a realm of ruins, temples, and offerings, long buried but never entirely forgotten. Imagine yourself walking through a quiet excavation site deep within the heart of the city. The air grows cooler underground, damp with the scent of freshly disturbed earth. Light filters dimly from electric lamps strung overhead, casting long shadows along walls of ancient stone, each one laid carefully by hands long turned to dust. Here lies the Templo Mayor, the great temple of the Aztecs, the ceremonial heart of Tenochtitlan. Once it towered above the city, a double pyramid dedicated to two powerful gods, Huitzilopochtli, the god of sun, and Tlaloc, the god of rain and fertility. Standing here centuries later, you can still sense the reverence and fear this place must have inspired. Every stone block carries the weight of ceremony, the processions of priests in jaguar pelts, the incense rising in curling tendrils, and the rhythmic beat of drums echoing against the walls. Archaeologists, with gentle tools and patient hands, have unearthed layers upon layers of history. Skulls carefully arranged in walls, sampantly, silent testaments to rituals meant to appease the gods. Altars encrusted with pigments and carvings that speak of a cosmology where every action fed into the cycle of life and death. One of the most extraordinary discoveries was the Coyolxauhqui stone, a massive circular relief depicting the dismembered body of the moon goddess, Coyolxauhqui. The imagery is startling, yet softened by time and the calm of this buried space. To the Aztecs, it told a story of cosmic balance, of the sun triumphing over the moon, light conquering darkness. Elsewhere, beneath the city, offerings have been uncovered. Intricate figurines of jade and obsidian, delicate jewelry, and even the remains of animals, eagles, jaguars, serpents, creatures sacred to the Aztecs, carefully placed in ritual deposits. Each item was a message to the gods, an attempt to maintain harmony in a world they believed was always on the brink of collapse. Imagine the artisans who shaped these offerings, the priests who whispered prayers over them, the crowds who gathered to watch ceremonies unfold, and imagine, too, the deep sense of awe that must have filled those who approached the Templo Mayor. Their footsteps echoing on stone steps worn smooth by generations. Even now, as the city above buzzes with life, the ruins below remain still, save for the occasional brush of a trowel or the murmur of a researcher's voice. Yet they speak, not in words, but in stones, bones, and artifacts, fragments of a society that saw itself intricately tied to the universe, both fragile and enduring. And the discoveries continue. New tunnels, hidden chambers, and subterranean passages are still being mapped. Every excavation is an unveiling, a patient dialogue with the past. But what of the people who lived not in the dirt and dust, but in splendor? The ones for whom sacrifice was spectacle, not threat. Let us now leave the dark hush of the underground and return to the world above, to the palaces, to the soft glow of torchlight, and to the refined pleasures of the Aztec elite. When you are ready, we shall step into the world of nobles, where feasts, etiquette, and cosmic contemplation to find a life vastly different from that of the commoner. Now, let us emerge slowly from the cool stillness of the earth, stepping carefully back into the warmth and light of the world above. The noise of the common market, the clamor of trade and toil fades away, replaced by the measured calm of stone courtyards, shaded porticos, and the gentle rustle of servants at work. We have entered the palace of an Aztec noble, one of the Pipilton, elite class whose lives unfolded far from the burdens of labor, but deeply intertwined with ritual, etiquette, and social duty. Picture the palace, not a palace of towering marble, but a complex of stone and stucco, painted in rich hues of red, blue, and ochre. Courtyards open to the sky, allowing sunlight to dapple the floors of polished stone. Fountains trickle with water drawn from aqueducts, their delicate sound a constant, soothing presence. The air is fragrant with the scent of copal incense and blooming flowers. Servants pass quietly, heads bowed, their hands carrying trays of food, drink, or implements for the day's ceremonies. Every gesture is measured, every step deliberate, for the household of a noble is governed by an intricate dance of propriety and deference. Now imagine the noble himself, perhaps seated on a woven mat, his posture upright, his face painted with subtle pigments that denote status. His cloak is made of fine cotton, dyed with indigo or cochineal, and his jewelry glimmers with jade, turquoise, and gold. This evening, a feast is being prepared. You can almost hear the gentle grind of the metate, where maize is crushed into smooth dough. Cooks stir clay pots over low fires, blending chilies, tomatoes, and cacao into rich sauces. Nearby, cacao beans are roasted and ground, destined to become the bitter, frothy chocolate drink prized by the elite. A beverage flavored not with sugar, but with spices like vanilla and chili. When the feast begins, the nobles sit on mats arranged according to rank and relation. Dishes are served on elegant plates, the food meticulously arranged. Turkey stewed in dark, spicy mole, tamales wrapped in maize leaves, and small fruits like guavas and prickly pears. The meal is accompanied by pulque, a mildly fermented drink made from the maguey plant, thick and milky, but highly valued. Yet this is no raucous affair. Conversation is polite, measured, guided by a deep sense of decorum. Speaking out of turn, eating too quickly, or showing too much eagerness would mark one as lacking in refinement. As the night deepens, music begins. Soft rhythms on topanasli drums, the airy sounds of flutes carved from bone or wood, and the resonant chimes of clay bells. Dancers may perform their movements telling ancient stories of gods, creation, and celestial battles. And above them, the night sky spreads wide and clear, the stars scattered like jade beads across black velvet. The cosmos was not mere decoration to the Aztecs. It was an ever-present participant in their lives. The noble might consult with a priest, an astrologer who reads the patterns of the stars, interpreting omens that guide decisions in war, trade, or marriage. Later, as the torches flicker low and the air grows cooler, the household retires. Even in rest, the routines of the palace continue. Servants tend to the fires, sweep the courtyards, prepare the chambers for another day. The noble, wrapped in finely woven blankets, sleeps lightly, his mind attuned to both earthly concerns and the distant whispers of the gods. There is a rhythm here too, a cycle of duty, display, and quiet contemplation. Life at the top was not merely about indulgence, but about upholding the complex social and cosmic order that held the Aztec world together. And so, with the soft sounds of the palace night settling around us, we gently draw our journey to a close. We have seen the struggles of the market laborer, the cautious grandeur of the emperor, the mysteries buried beneath the city, and the refined world of the elite. Let us now move to our closing reflections, where the echoes of this ancient world meet the quiet comforts of the present. Imagine waking long before the first light of dawn, in a narrow chamber, cold in the winter, stifling in the summer. Your sleeping mat is thin, your blanket rough, and the air is heavy with the scent of wood smoke, damp stone, and old fabric. You rise quickly, without complaint, because the first rule of life here is simple: obedience without hesitation. To delay, to disobey, to make even a minor misstep, is to risk punishment. Perhaps a caning, perhaps dismissal, or worse, a quiet disappearance into obscurity. You are a servant in the Forbidden City, the sprawling palace complex at the heart of Beijing. The walls that rise around you are not merely physical barriers, but symbols of control, hierarchy, and the emperor's unreachable presence. Your day begins with cleaning. Endless cleaning. The palace is a world of stone corridors, wooden halls, tiled roofs, and elaborate courtyards. Dust settles constantly. Surfaces must gleam, floors must be swept, and objects must be precisely arranged according to protocol. You move silently, your cloth shoes making no sound on the stone. Conversation is minimal, and when it occurs, it is hushed and formal. Every gesture is watched. If you are tasked with cleaning the outer halls of an imperial residence, your eyes must remain lowered. To look directly at the emperor, the empress, or any member of the royal family is forbidden, unless permission is granted, which it rarely is. Imagine dusting intricate wooden carvings, each depicting dragons, phoenixes, and auspicious symbols. Your hands careful not to disturb or damage what might be centuries old. You carry water in heavy buckets, careful not to spill a drop on the polished floors. The tools of your labor, brushes, cloths, small ladders, are plain, but maintained meticulously. Meals, when permitted, are sparse. A bowl of rice, perhaps a few vegetables, some tea if your rank allows. You eat quickly and in designated areas, for you are not part of the life of the palace. You are its machinery, its quiet maintenance. There are hierarchies among the servants too. Some are lowly sweepers. Others tend to laundry, cooking, or candle making. The most trusted, often eunuchs, manage the complex schedules of the imperial household. Even among them, a strict pecking order ensures that ambition is tempered by caution. The penalties for error are severe. A wrong word, a misplaced object, a sign of disrespect. All can lead to public beatings in the courtyard, or quietly being sent away, never to return. Sometimes the punishment is formal, with rituals and records. Other times it is informal, whispered, and final. Yet not all is harshness. There are moments of beauty. Tending to the delicate bonsai in an inner garden. Watching the sun rise over the glazed roof tiles that shine like gold, hearing the distant sounds of the court musicians practicing for some unseen ceremony. You know your place, and you hold to it tightly. Your role is not to be seen, but to serve, to be as much a fixture of the palace as the red walls themselves. And yet, every so often, a servant's eye might catch a fleeting glimpse. A passing silk robe. A glimmer of jade jewelry. The faint scent of incense carried on the breeze from an emperor's procession. But you do not look long. To linger is dangerous. As the day wears on, the cycle repeats. Clean, serve, obey, and disappear. The palace remains pristine, as though it maintains itself, but beneath the surface is your quiet, unseen labor. Night comes, but rest is uncertain. There is always work to do, someone to please, or the risk of an unexpected summons. This is your life, structured, controlled, often thankless, but vital. For without the countless invisible hands like yours, the grandeur of the Forbidden City would crumble into dust. Let us leave now this world of quiet toil and ascend gently into the life of power, strategy, and spectacle. A woman who began her life not unlike others in the palace, but rose to command an empire from behind its red walls. Let us now leave behind the dim, narrow quarters of the servants, and rise softly through the layers of hierarchy, up into chambers filled with silk screens, perfumed air, and the quiet rustle of embroidered slippers. Here, in the deeper recesses of the Forbidden City, dwelled a figure who shaped the fate of China itself, Empress Dowager Cixi. She was born in 1835 to a modestly ranked family. Entering the palace as a low-ranking concubine to the Shanfeng Emperor, but through careful calculation, intelligence, and a keen sense of court politics, she would rise slowly, deliberately, to become the de facto ruler of the Qing dynasty for nearly half a century. But tonight, let us visit her near the end of her long, complicated life, in the twilight of her power. In the final days of an empire, crumbling under the weight of modern pressures and internal decay, is the year 1908, and the Forbidden City is hushed. The air is cool, tinged with the scent of medicinal herbs, ginseng, licorice root, and pungent mixtures prepared by palace physicians, who come and go in silence. Cixi is elderly now, her once vibrant energy dulled, but her presence remains commanding. Her bedchamber is vast but dim, the heavy curtains drawn against the autumn chill. Walls of intricate wood latticework are softened by silk tapestries, their patterns faded with time. There are vases of fresh chrysanthemums, their fragrance subtle, a reminder of the season's transience. Cixi reclines on her opulent couch, draped in embroidered robes of deep blue and gold, her long fingernails protected by delicate gold sheaths, an emblem of her status, since such nails signaled a life free from manual labor. Nearby eunuchs and trusted ladies, in waiting, stand ready, their expressions careful, their movements practiced. She is weak, but her mind remains sharp. Visitors are few, and only those she trusts are permitted entry. She knows her time is short, and she has matters to arrange. Power, once grasped with such determination, is not easily surrendered, even to death. Cixi reflects, perhaps on her path. She had risen to power after the death of her son, the Tongzi Emperor, ruling as regent first for him, and then for her nephew, the Guangxu Emperor. Her governance had been marked by contradiction. Moments of modernization, like the introduction of railways and telegraph lines, interspersed with periods of repression and fierce conservatism. She is also haunted, some might say, by the shadow of the Boxer Rebellion, the violent anti-foreigner uprising that saw Cixi at first support, then retreat from its cause. The rebellion failed, and foreign powers imposed humiliating terms on China. The empire stood weakened, its sovereignty diminished. In these final days, Cixi is said to have orchestrated her last political act, ensuring that the Guangxu Emperor, whom she had long kept under strict control, would not outlive her by more than a day. Indeed, the Guangxu Emperor died the day before her own passing. Rumors persist that he was poisoned, though official records remain silent, veiled by discretion. Now resting in her chamber, Cixi contemplates the fragile threads of power, Huff legacy, of an empire standing on unsteady ground. She orders the succession to be secured. Her chosen heir is the young Pui, just a child, destined to be China's last emperor. On November 15, 1908, Empress Dowager Cixi dies. The Forbidden City falls into deep mourning, though the machinery of power continues. For a time, in the hands of her successors, her body is prepared according to strict rituals. Layers of silk robes, intricate jewelry, and ceremonial objects are arranged with care. She is placed within a grand coffin and eventually interred in the Eastern Qing tombs, a necropolis of emperors. Stone guardians and dragon carvings stand vigil. Her death marks not just the end of a personal reign, but the beginning of the empire's final decline. Within a few short years, the Qing dynasty will collapse, and the centuries-long rule of emperors in China will come to an end. Yet in the quiet corners of the Forbidden City, her presence lingers. In the ornate screens she commissioned, the gardens she walked, the lavish halls where she once held court, and beneath these grand spaces, the palace conceals still more. Secrets hidden in tunnels. Chambers unknown to most, and treasures sealed away by those who sought to control access, movement, and knowledge itself. Let us continue, drifting now from the high chambers of power to the quiet spaces beneath the palace. The shadowy corridors, sealed rooms, and passageways concealed by walls thick with lacquered wood and brick. The Forbidden City, with its imposing symmetry and soaring gates, was more than a residence. It was a labyrinth, meticulously designed not just for grandeur, but for control, secrecy, and defense. Beneath its pavilions and courtyards, beneath the glitter of gold and the weight of jade, lies a hidden infrastructure, a network of passages, storerooms, and escape routes. Some of these tunnels are known, some remain mere whispers in the historical record, and others are still being uncovered by careful archaeological work. Imagine yourself standing in a cool, dim corridor beneath the earth, your footsteps soft against the smooth stone floor. The air is still, almost stale, as though it has been waiting in place for centuries. Light flickers from a distant lantern, a modern intrusion into this ancient space. One such passage is said to connect the Hall of Supreme Harmony, the grand throne room of the Emperor, to the inner living quarters. It is a discreet path for the Emperor to move without public gaze. A means of ensuring security and privacy in a court where politics could be as dangerous as any battlefield. Then there are the treasure vaults, hidden chambers where the imperial family stored the most precious artifacts. Scrolls of calligraphy, intricate bronzes, jeweled headdresses, and ceremonial regalia. Some treasures were kept not just for their beauty or value, but because they held symbolic power. Relics of dynasties past, gifts from distant lands, and objects tied to imperial rituals. When the last emperors fell and the Republic was born, many of these vaults were sealed, forgotten, or looted. Yet some still lie beneath the palace, awaiting rediscovery. Occasionally, an unassuming wall reveals a hidden alcove containing fragments of silk, bronze, mirrors, or lacquer boxes. These are fragile echoes of a world that moved with ceremony and concealment. Archaeologists, moving slowly and deliberately, brush away layers of dust and debris, uncovering not just artifacts, but architectural secrets. Hidden staircases, narrow shafts designed for quick escape, and water channels meant to provide for the palace's private gardens. All tell of a world prepared for both elegance and emergency. One particularly intriguing discovery is the presence of sealed storage rooms, still untouched in modern times, where records suggest ceremonial garments, instruments, and even unused jade burial suits may rest. The exact contents remain unknown, for to disturb these spaces is a matter of both technical care and cultural sensitivity. But the Forbidden City's secrets are not limited to its physical depths. There are also lost texts, manuals on court etiquette, diagrams of palace layouts, and coded writings intended for the eyes of only the highest officials. Some of these have surfaced in private collections, their meanings still being parsed by scholars today. And then there are the ghost stories whispered by caretakers and guards, tales of soft footsteps in empty halls, its fleeting glimpses of figures in imperial robes, and the feeling of being watched in rooms long sealed from public view. These stories persist, not as historical fact, but as gentle reminders that a place so saturated with memory often feels alive in its own quiet way. As we stand in these hidden spaces, surrounded by stone, wood, shadow, it is easy to imagine the countless lives that passed overhead, unaware of the chambers below. But now, let us ascend again, from the hidden to the visible, from the secret to the ceremonial. Above these tunnels, life continued in a well-orchestrated rhythm of music, art, and precise etiquette. As we rise from the hidden chambers beneath the palace, let us step softly into the daylight-filled courtyards and ornate halls where the Qing dynasty court unfolded its carefully choreographed existence. Imagine the delicate morning light filtering through latticed windows, casting geometric patterns on silk carpets and polished wooden floors. The air is cool, carrying the subtle fragrances of sandalwood incense and freshly cut lotus flowers arranged in porcelain vases. The court awakens not with haste, but with a measured rhythm. Each movement deliberate, each gesture steeped in centuries of tradition. At dawn, gentle notes of the chin, a seven-stringed zither, float through the palace corridors. This instrument, prized by scholars and nobles alike, sets a serene tone for the day ahead. The players sit cross-legged on mats, their fingers moving slowly over the strings, producing melodies that invite calm reflection. Around the palace, attendants prepare for the day's rituals. Courtiers don robes embroidered with dragons and phoenixes, symbols of imperial authority and cosmic harmony. Every fold of fabric, every knot of a sash is precise, for even the smallest lapse in dress is noticed. In the great halls, the emperor and his family begin their formal audiences. Officials bow in measured fashion, offering petitions and reports. Those speeches are composed with care, delivered in soft tones that echo with deference but never rise to loudness. Meals in the court are elegant affairs. Dishes are served on lacquered trays, each bite a balance of flavor and symbolism. Delicacies like steamed dumplings filled with minced pork, sweet rice cakes, and lotus seed soup appear alongside bowls of fragrant jasmine tea. Conversation is sparse, respectful, and often interrupted by the entrance of palace musicians or the reading of poetry. Throughout the day, the court observes strict etiquette. The positioning of hands during greetings, the timing of steps across marble floors, and the order of seating at gatherings all follow established codes that maintain social harmony and express the emperor's supreme status. Artisans and scholars work quietly inside chambers, crafting delicate porcelain, painting scrolls, or compiling encyclopedias. Their efforts contribute not only to the court's aesthetic, but to its intellectual prestige. As afternoon fades, attention turns to the observation of cosmic omens. Court astrologers consult star charts, calculating auspicious dates and interpreting celestial movements. These readings influence decisions on everything from ceremonies to military campaigns, reinforcing the connection between the earthly realm and the heavens. Evenings in the palace bring softer light. Lanterns glowing with warm hues, their paper sides painted with scenes of nature or mythology. Gentle music resumes, accompanied by the quiet murmur of conversation and the soft rustling of silk garments. Before rest, courtiers might walk the palace gardens, where koi fish glide beneath the surface of still ponds and willow branches sway with the night breeze. Here, the pressures of court life momentarily give way to contemplation and quiet renewal. The day closes as it began, with calm and order, delicate balance maintained between power and tradition, spectacle and solitude. As we reflect on the rhythms of this imperial world, from the unseen labor of servants to the measured authority of emperors, we recognize the vast spectrum of life within the Forbidden City. It was a place of contrasts, silence and ceremony, concealment and display, endurance and fleeting power. Now, as your eyes grow heavier and your thoughts slow, allow yourself to gently drift away from this ancient palace, back to the comfort of your own surroundings. Imagine for a moment waking to the gray light of dawn. Not in the comfort of a bed, but on a crude pallet of straw and animal skins laid across the earthen floor of a hut made from wattle and daub. The air inside is heavy with smoke, for there is no chimney, only a small hole in the roof where some of the smoke escapes. The rest hangs low, stinging your eyes and thickening your breath. Around you, the smell is a blend of damp soil, wood smoke, and the musk of livestock. For in this place, you do not live apart from the animals. They share your home. Pigs snuffle in a corner. Goats shift restlessly, their sharp scent part of the atmosphere. Their presence provides warmth against the chill, but it is warmth that comes with fleas, lice, and the constant hum of flies. Your body aches, not from a single injury, but from the slow accumulation of strain. Carrying heavy loads of firewood, turning the soil with simple wooden tools, grinding grain by hand on a stone quern, a task that takes hours each day, producing coarse flour that leaves traces of grit, wearing down teeth over the years. Breakfast is simple. A porridge of barley or wheat, flavored if you're fortunate with wild herbs or honey. The grain is tough, the texture rough, clean water is rare. Often it's thick with sediment, or slightly sour from sitting in wooden or leather containers. The workday begins with tending the animals, feeding, milking, securing fences made from woven branches. Then comes the field work. The soil is turned using a basic plow or digging stick, an exhausting task, especially in colder seasons when the ground resists. Crops are unreliable, threatened by drought, floods, or pests. If you are a woman, your tasks are many. Maintaining the hearth, making pottery, weaving rough fabrics from wool or flax, caring for children. If you are a child, your work begins early in life, watching herds or collecting firewood. Any mistake, any negligence, could mean disaster for the family. Your skin is rough from the sun, wind, and dirt. Lice are constant companions, burrowing into hair and clothes, their bites an ever-present irritation. Soap, in the way we know it, does not exist. Cleaning is done with water, when available, sometimes with ash or sand to scrub the skin. Illness is common and poorly understood. Cuts easily fester, coughs linger through seasons, and malnutrition is an unrelenting threat. Protein is scarce. Meat is precious and often saved for special occasions. Most days, your belly is filled with grain, root vegetables, and what you can gather from the wild: berries, nuts, wild greens. The village is a small collection of huts, huddled together for warmth and protection. There is a sense of community, yet every neighbor is also a rival for scarce resources. Superstition governs much of thought. Strange illnesses are blamed on spirits or curses, and shamans or wise folk offer charms of bone or stone to ward off misfortune. And as night falls, the world beyond the flickering firelight feels vast and unknowable. Wolves howl in the distance. The forest is a place of danger, its paths known only to the most daring. You wrap yourself in a rough cloak of wool, lay again on your pallet, and try to sleep despite the lice, the cold, the aches, and the looming dread of another day, just like this one. Such was the rhythm of life in a Bronze Age village, a life of relentless labor, fleeting pleasures, and constant uncertainty. Yet even in such a world, individual stories persisted. Lives marked by journeys, conflicts, and mysterious ends. One such life is that of C. the Iceman, whose final moments preserved in the ice of the Alps tell us a haunting tale of survival, violence, and the fragile nature of existence. Now, let us leave behind the smoky, crowded village and ascend into the higher, colder reaches of the ancient world, to a landscape of rugged stone, alpine meadows, and icy winds that sweep across the jagged peaks. It is here high in the Eastall Alps, straddling what is now the border between Austria and Italy, that a man met his final moments over 50 years ago, his body preserved in ice undisturbed for millennia, till modern hikers stumbled upon his remains in 1991. We know him today as C. the Iceman, Europe's oldest natural mummy, an extraordinary window into the daily life and death of the Bronze Age. Imagine C. in his final days. He was about 45 years old, an advanced age for his time, his body lean and wiry. His skin, weathered and darkened, would have been marked by a lifetime of exposure to sun, wind, and cold. His hair was dark, cut short, and his face bore a trimmed beard. Signs of care and personal appearance, even in such a rough age. His clothes were carefully made: a cloak stitched from woven grass, a coat, leggings, and loincloth crafted from various animal hides: goat, deer, and bear. On his feet, he wore shoes fashioned from leather and stuffed with grass for insulation, remarkably well suited to the cold alpine terrain. C was equipped for survival, carried a copper axe, its blade secured to a yew-wood handle with leather straps and birch tar, a valuable and advanced tool for the period. He had a dagger with a flint blade, a quiver of unfinished arrows, and a longbow, though incomplete. Alongside these, he carried a birch bark container, perhaps used to transport embers to rekindle fire. His gear tells a story of preparedness, but also of vulnerability. His bow unfinished, his arrows unsharpened. Perhaps he had been interrupted. Perhaps he was repairing his kit while on the move. And what of his health? Scans of his body revealed that he suffered from worn joints, likely arthritis, and hardened arteries, suggesting a lifetime of physical toil and a diet heavy in meat and grains. He carried the DNA of parasites, including whipworm, indicating digestive troubles. There were also signs of previous injuries, including healed broken ribs. But what makes C especially fascinating is the mystery of his death. Examination of his remains uncovered a flint arrowhead lodged in his left shoulder, a wound that would have been fatal, suggesting he was shot from behind. There were also cuts on his hands, signs of a recent struggle. Near his body lay his belongings, scattered yet present, indicating that robbery was unlikely. His stomach contents revealed his final meals, a hearty intake of ibex meat, red deer, and einkorn wheat, suggesting that he had eaten not long before his death. The presence of charcoal particles implies he cooked this meal, perhaps in a mountain shelter or by a campfire in the open air. What drove him into the high mountains remains unclear. Was he fleeing enemies? Did he ascend for ritual purposes, or perhaps in search of resources like flint or game? The answer is lost to time. Lying there on the icy slope, alone beneath a sky of shifting clouds, his life ended. But the cold preserved his story, his tools, his clothing, even the tattoos that marked his skin. Lines and crosses whose purpose we can only guess. Cece's body remained hidden under layers of snow and ice, undisturbed until its accidental discovery in the late 20th century. Since then, he has been studied with care and reverence, yielding insights not only into his life, but into the broader world of the Bronze Age. Through him, we glimpse a time of constant movement, subtle violence, and fragile survival, where each day was a negotiation with the environment, with other people, and with one's own body. But CS time was also connected to a world shaped by larger forces, communities that marked their presence with great monuments of stone and earth structures that still stand, enigmatic and silent across the landscapes of Europe. Now, let your mind drift from the craggy alpine heights, where Tiez met his fate, to the rolling hills and broad, open landscapes of prehistoric Europe. Here, scattered across the earth, rise enduring monuments of stone and earth, structures crafted with care, its effort, and a deep connection to both land and sky. You may picture them, stone circles, their megaliths arranged in deliberate patterns, some towering and rough-hewn, others squat and weathered by time. Beside them, the softly rounded forms of burial mounds, known as barrows or tumuli, swelling gently from the earth, cloaked in grass and moss. The people of the Bronze Age, though living lives of daily hardship, looked beyond their immediate survival. They built monuments meant to endure, meant to speak across generations. And yet, the precise meanings behind these efforts remain cloaked in mystery. Let us begin with the stone circles, the most famous of which is undoubtedly Stonehenge in southern England. Though Stonehenge itself began in earlier Neolithic times, it was the people of the early Bronze Age who finalized many of its features. Refining the alignment of its great stones to the cycles of the sun and the moon, imagine standing within such a circle at dawn. The chill air is still, the horizon faintly aglow with the first pale light. The massive stones loom above you, their surfaces rough to the touch, speckled with lichen. In certain seasons, the rising sun aligns perfectly with a specific stone or gap, a deliberate arrangement that speaks of careful observation of the heavens. But Stonehenge is not alone. Across Britain, Ireland, and parts of continental Europe, there are countless lesser-known circles, avenues of stones and alignments that trace the paths of celestial bodies. Were these observatories, ritual spaces, or both? Scholars suggest that such places marked seasonal transitions, the solstices, equinoxes, critical moments for agricultural societies. To know the turning of the year was to prepare for planting, harvesting, and the lean months of winter. Yet beyond the practical, there is a palpable sense of sacred space in these constructions. The effort required to move and erect stones weighing several tons without modern tools or machinery speaks to a communal dedication to something greater than immediate need. Perhaps these were spaces where the living could commune with the spirits of ancestors, where rites of passage were held, or where the movements of the stars were interpreted as messages from the divine. Not far from many stone circles lie burial mounds, where the dead were laid to rest beneath layers of soil, sometimes accompanied by grave goods, pottery, beads, weapons, and ornaments. Some mounds contain multiple burials, spanning generations, while others enclose a single individual of apparent importance. a chieftain, or a shaman, resting within a timbered chamber. Step inside one of these mounds in your imagination. The air is cool and dry, the light dim, the earth muffles sound, creating a hushed reverence. Around you, the remnants of ancient offerings remain. Fragments of pottery, traces of woven cloth, a polished stone axe perhaps once held in pride. The alignment of some mounds with the movements of the sun, the way certain shafts of light enter the chambers only on specific days of the year, suggests that these places were more than tombs. They were portals between worlds, between the living and the dead, between earth and sky. Even today, we do not fully understand the full meanings encoded in these landscapes. Were they maps of the cosmos? Stages for communal storytelling? Sites of political power where leaders asserted their dominance through displays of control over time and space? What is certain is that the people of the Bronze Age lived not just for the present, but with a deep sense of the eternal, the turning of seasons, cycles of life and death, the constancy of the sun, the moon, and the stars. These stones, these mounds, remain as quiet witnesses to their builders' hopes, fears, and wonder. They remind us that even in an age of hardship, humanity looked up to the sky, to the horizon, seeking understanding, seeking connection. Now let us return from these enduring markers of time and mortality and make our way to a different scene, one of warmth, community, and fleeting abundance. The world of the Bronze Age chiefs, where food, drink, and stories by the fire offered brief respite from the grind of survival. Let us now imagine, as the sun dips low on the horizon and shadows stretch across the land, that you are approaching a Bronze Age settlement, unlike the cramped and smoky village of ordinary folk. This is the homestead of a chieftain, a person of status and power, surrounded by wooden palisades and larger, sturdier dwellings. There is an air of preparation here, for tonight is a time of feasting, a rare and momentous occasion. People gather from nearby settlements, each bringing contributions of grain, livestock, or crafted goods, all offered in deference to the chief and in anticipation of the shared bounty. The central hall is larger than any typical dwelling, its walls reinforced with timber, its roof high and thatched. Inside, the air is warm with the scent of roasted meat, smoke from the hearth, and the faint sweetness of fermenting drink, a crude but effective mead made from honey and wild herbs. You find a place among the others, seated on low benches or rough-hewn stools arranged around the fire. The flames flicker, their light dancing across faces marked by weather and age, by tattoos and ochre-painted designs. The feast begins with simple fare, thick stews of barley and lentils, dense bread baked on hot stones, and slabs of roasted pork or venison. For many, meat is a rarity, reserved for occasions such as this, and its presence tonight is a cause for quiet excitement. As the meal progresses, clay cups are passed around, filled with mead, sweet, heady, and slightly sour. The drink warms the belly, loosens tongues, and fuels the slow, measured conversations that flow around the hall. The chief presides over the gathering, not aloof, but central, a figure of authority whose presence commands attention. His garments may be adorned with bronze ornaments, intricate torques around the neck, and pins that secure his cloak, signs of his wealth and connections. After the meal, the hall grows quieter as attention turns to the storytellers and musicians. One elder rises, his voice soft but steady, weaving tales of the ancestors, of battles won and lost, of journeys across great rivers and towering mountains. These stories are both entertainment and instruction, a way to pass on knowledge, values, and the memory of the tribe. Simple instruments accompany the tales, perhaps a bone flute, its notes airy and haunting, or the rhythmic beat of a skin drum. The music is not elaborate, but its cadence mirrors the heartbeat of the community, slow, steady, enduring. Overhead, smoke from the central hearth spirals upward, escaping through the thatched roof into the cool night. The stars beyond are bright, unmarred by modern light, and their patterns are familiar to all gathered here, each constellation tied to a story or omen. Feasts like this serve many purposes. They reaffirm alliances, resolve disputes, and mark seasonal transitions. They are moments when the grind of daily toil is paused, replaced by collective celebration, however modest by our modern standards. Yet even here, hierarchy is clear. The chief and his close kin eat first, their portions generous. Lesser folk wait their turn, content with smaller shares but grateful for inclusion. Status is reinforced not just through words but through the distribution of food, drink, and stories. As the fire burns low and the embers glow red, the hall gradually quiets. Some drift into sleep on mats and furs, others murmur softly, their words blending with the crackle of the fire. The feast ends not abruptly, but with a gradual return to stillness, to the familiar rhythm of rest. The morning will bring a return to labor, fields to tend, animals to tend, tools to repair. But for one night, beneath a roof of smoke, darkened timbers, and a sky vast and unchanging, the people of the Bronze Age come together to share in the simple pleasures of food, drink, and story. In the flickering half-light, the boundary between past and present blurs. The warmth of the fire, the sound of quiet conversation, the comfort of a full belly, these things remain timeless. And so as the fire dies down in your mind's eye, allow yourself to settle into that same sense of calm. A shared human experience, across ages where the night brings stillness and the earth itself feels a little closer. Imagine yourself, if you will, waking before the first pale light of dawn in the ancient city of yore, or perhaps Babylon. The air is still cool from the night, but already heavy with the promise of heat. You rise from a simple mat, your body stiff, and begin your walk toward the scribal skulda, Idaba, or tablet house. The school is not a place of play or light learning. It is stern, disciplined, and ruled by the sharp eye and sharper reed of the master teacher. You are an apprentice scribe, and today, like every day, your task is clear. Copy, copy, and copy again. There is no ink or paper. Instead, you work with slabs of moist clay, smooth and damp, each one carefully prepared. In your hand is a stylus, a simple reed cut to a wedge-shaped point. With this, you press and shape the marks of cuneiform, the wedge-like script that captures the language of kings, merchants, and gods. The script is precise, angular, and utterly unforgiving. A slight slip of the hand, a misaligned stroke, and the tablet must be redone. The clay is tolerant of none but the most deliberate and practiced motions. Hours pass in the dim room, the walls of mud brick enclosing you like a cocoon. The air is thick with the scent of damp clay and the faint musk of oil lamps. Around you, other scribes' boys mostly, some scarcely more than children, sit hunched, their fingers stained gray from the constant handling of earth. Your work is observed constantly. The master walks among the pupils, his reed switch ever at the ready. Discipline is swift. A careless hand earns a sharp crack across the knuckles. A forgotten sign, a botched line, more punishment still. Learning here is by repetition and correction, the body trained alongside the mind. You copy lexical lists long, tedious inventories of symbols, words, and phrases. Lists of animals, types of wood, cities, professions, metals, and offerings. Nothing flows like a story. Everything is categorized, ordered, wrote. Occasionally you might copy a hymn or a legal formula or even part of an epic poem. But the bulk of your time is spent not in creative writing, but in ensuring that the shapes of the symbols are consistent, perfect, reliable. For in Mesopotamia, writing is not art, it is record-keeping, taxation, contracts, receipts. The days blur together, marked by the steady rhythm of the stylus pressing into clay, the sighs of tired students, and the master's constant vigilance. Meals are plain, bread, perhaps a stew, dates if fortunate. There is little conversation. The mind is too fatigued, the body too sore. Once your training is complete, life as a scribe offers more stability than farming or laboring, but not necessarily wealth or social elevation. You might find employment with a temple, where records of offerings and ceremonies are maintained, or in a merchant service, where contracts for grain shipments and livestock are inscribed. There is pride in literacy, yes, but also tedium. The work remains repetitive, the environment hierarchical. One mistake on a clay tablet can mean hours lost, a rebuke from a superior, or the humiliation of starting over. The clay dust works its way into your skin, leaving a gritty residue that seems never to fully wash away. The stylus leaves calluses on your fingers, The posture of constant writing curves your back, and the mind, though sharp, grows weary. And so each day the scribe endures a life bounded by signs, symbols, and the relentless demands of the written word. Yet through these weary hands the voices of gods, kings, and poets endure. The dull labor of the scribe is what preserved the stories, myths, and records that survive to this day. And chief among these preserved tales is one that begins with a boastful king, a tale of friendship, loss, and the search for something eternal, the Epic of Gilgamesh. Now that we have sat with the weary scribe, the one hunched over his clay tablet, let us imagine for a moment that he copies not lists or inventories, but a story. A story that has passed from master to apprentice, scribe to student, for centuries. One of the oldest stories ever recorded. The Epic of Gilgamesh, preserved in the neat, wedge-shaped impressions of cuneiform, is more than just a tale. It is a window into the longings and fears of ancient Mesopotamia, a mirror of human nature, cast in clay and carried through millennia. Picture yourself in the ancient city of Uruk, its walls tall and impressive, built of baked brick that rises above the flat plains. The sun beats relentlessly, and in the marketplace, traders speak in many tongues, but all know the name of their king, Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh, the mighty, the boastful, is described as 2/3 divine and 1/3 human. A man of immense strength and wisdom, but also of arrogance. As the story begins, the people of Uruk groan under his rule. He is a tyrant, taking what he wishes, burdening his people with endless displays of his power. And so, the gods intervene, create Enkidu, a wild man of the steppe, hairy and unkempt, living among animals. Enkidu is designed to be Gilgamesh's equal, a counterbalance to his pride. But before Enkidu can confront the king, he must be tamed. Drawn from his wild state by the civilizing influences of companionship, food, and drink. Their encounter is legendary. Gilgamesh and Enkidu fight. A clash of strength and will, but neither prevails. Instead, in that struggle, they recognize each other's might and form a deep, abiding friendship. Together, they embark on daring adventures. They journey to the cedar forest, where they confront Humbaba, the monstrous guardian appointed by the god Enlil. They slay Humbaba, despite his pleas for mercy, an act that brings both glory and divine disapproval. Later, they kill the bull of heaven, sent by the goddess Ishtar in vengeance for Gilgamesh's spurning of her affections. This act of defiance against the gods seals their fate. For their hubris, punishment comes. The gods decree that Enkidu must die. His death is slow and painful, a lingering sickness that no strength can overcome. Gilgamesh, who has faced beasts and gods unflinchingly, is shattered by the loss. Here, the story deepens. Gilgamesh, now haunted by grief and the reality of mortality, sets out on a new quest. Not for fame, but for immortality. He seeks out Utnapishtim, the one man granted eternal life by the gods after surviving a great flood, a story eerily similar to later tales of Noah. His journey is long and fraught with symbolic challenges. He crosses waters of death, meets strange beings, and finally finds Utnapishtim, who recounts the story of the flood and offers Gilgamesh a test to stay awake for 6 days and 7 nights. But Gilgamesh, exhausted, fails the test. Sleep, that gentle conqueror, claims him, proving that even he is but mortal. Utnapishtim tells him of a plant that can restore youth, and Gilgamesh retrieves it, but while bathing, a serpent steals it away. The plant, and with it, the hope of renewed life, is lost. Thus, Gilgamesh returns to Uruk, not with immortality, but with understanding. He beholds his city's grand walls, and realizes that while he may not escape death, his works, his city, and his story may endure. It is a story of acceptance, of the limits of human power, and of the value of legacy. A tale that the weary scribes copied, line by line, ensuring that Gilgamesh's name would survive, as indeed it has. As you listen, perhaps the rhythm of these ancient events lulls your thoughts. The rise and fall of kings, the search for meaning, the embrace of human limitations, all echo softly through the corridors of time. Let us now leave behind the echo of Gilgamesh's footsteps in the great city of Uruk, and instead, gaze upward at the monumental shapes that dominate the Mesopotamian horizon. The ziggurats. These were not just towers of brick and mortar. To the ancient peoples of Sumer, Akkad, and Babylon, ziggurats were the earthly abodes of the gods, constructed to bridge the distance between the heavens and the mortal world below. Imagine yourself standing at the base of one of these towering structures. The most famous among them might be the Etemenanki of Babylon, believed by some to be the inspiration for the biblical Tower of Babel. Rising in stepped levels, each platform smaller than the one beneath, the ziggurat climbs skyward, a geometric mountain of baked clay and bitumen mortar. There are no elevators, no convenient stairs as we know them, only sloping ramps or stairways that coil upwards. Exposed to the sun and wind, climbing such a tower is an effort, your breath steadying with each level reached, the city below gradually shrinking in perspective. But the ziggurat is not a place for the common person. Its summit is reserved for the priesthood, the elite intermediaries between gods and men. At the top, a small temple sits, perhaps modest by today's standards, but sacred. Its walls painted, its altars prepared for offerings of incense, oils, and grain. We may wonder what lay within these temples. Some suggest that at night priests would tend to fires and perform quiet rituals under the stars. Others imagine that the gods themselves would descend invisibly to partake in these rites, to listen, perhaps to advise. Archaeologists, centuries later, have probed these structures. Beneath their sturdy tiers, remnants of earlier foundations and sealed chambers hint at a complex past. Renovations, reconstructions, and perhaps hidden purposes. Though little remains but crumbled brick, traces of storerooms, altars, processional paths paint a faint picture of ceremonial life. Ziggurats were not tombs, unlike the pyramids of Egypt, nor were they mere temples. They stood as symbols of religious devotion, of political power, and of the cosmic order that placed gods above, mortals below, and the king somewhere in between. And yet, for all their grandeur, their interiors were surprisingly simple. Unlike the later cathedrals of Europe, there was no labyrinth of halls or dazzling stained glass. Instead, the structure itself, towering and imposing, was the statement, a declaration of a city's prosperity and its closeness to the divine. The mystery deepens when we consider their astronomical alignments. Some scholars propose that ziggurats were positioned in harmony with the movements of the stars and planets. In a world where celestial bodies dictated the planting of crops, the timing of festivals, and the interpretation of omens, the ziggurat was perhaps both a stairway to heaven and a cosmic calendar. Over time, these grand structures decayed. Floods, conquests, and the inexorable passage of time reduced many to rubble. Yet their footprint remains, both in the earth and in memory. Even today, the word ziggurat conjures a layered, ascending tower, a shape etched into human consciousness. If you listen carefully, you can almost hear the footsteps of the priests ascending in the cool dawn, their sandals brushing against the coarse bricks, the faint hum of a chant carried away by the wind. And beneath these layers of brick and history, the earth holds secrets still, waiting, perhaps, for future hands to unearth a sealed chamber, a forgotten inscription, or a relic left behind in a corner of the temple. In the silent majesty of the ziggurat, the ambitions of mortals and the mystery of the divine remain entwined. Like the steady ascent of a staircase into the sky, now, let us descend from the lofty heights of the ziggurat and walk the broad avenues of Babylon, the city of legend and grandeur. Ahead lies the palace of the Babylonian king, a sprawling complex of halls, courtyards, and hidden chambers, all enclosed within imposing walls of sun-dried brick. Imagine approaching the Ishtar Gate, its deep blue glazed bricks shimmering under the Mesopotamian sun, adorned with reliefs of lions, bulls, and dragons, symbols of power and divine favor. Through this monumental gateway, one enters a realm carefully curated to impress and intimidate, to evoke the might of the sovereign who dwells within. The palace itself is less a singular building and more a labyrinthine collection of rooms and courtyards, some open to the sky, others roofed with timber and mud brick. The walls are coated in plaster, occasionally painted, though much of the color has faded with the centuries. The floors are compacted earth, or in some chambers paved with stone. Within these walls, the rhythms of royal life unfold. The king awakens not to an alarm, but to the murmurs of servants, the faint strains of morning music from court musicians, and the preparation of ritual offerings. Attendants dress him in fine robes, woven from wool and linen, dyed in precious colors such as indigo and crimson. Jewelry of gold and lapis lazuli gleams at his wrists and neck. His mornings might be spent in audience halls, receiving emissaries and subjects. These halls are grand but spare, their dimensions conveying authority more than comfort. Scribes are ever present, recording transactions, decrees, and gifts in clay. The quiet scratching of stylus on tablet, a constant accompaniment to state business. Behind the formal chambers lie more private spaces, gardens, shaded porticos, and perhaps the most wondrous of all, the famed hanging gardens of Babylon. While their existence remains debated, the vision persists of tiered gardens lush with greenery, vines trailing from terraces, and the sound of water trickling from ingenious irrigation systems. Imagine walking through such a garden, the air cooler, heavy with the scent of date palms, myrtle, and flowering shrubs. The rustle of leaves and distant calls of birds soften the noise of the city beyond the walls. If the gardens existed, they would have been an oasis in a landscape of heat and dust, a marvel of engineering and beauty combined. The palace is also a place of political intrigue. Courtiers, priests, generals, and family members maneuver for influence. Secrets are whispered in shadowed corridors. Alliances are made and broken over shared meals and private conversations. The king must navigate these currents carefully, displaying favor while guarding against betrayal. Feasts are held in great halls, though perhaps less lavish than we might imagine. Bread, beer, dates, and lamb are common fare, accompanied by music from lyres and flutes. Dancers perform, their movements slow and measured, their jingling anklets keeping time with the rhythm. In the evenings, the palace settles into a quieter pace. The king may consult diviners and astrologers who read the patterns of stars and interpret omens cast in the form of liver models or spilled oil. The Mesopotamians placed great stock in such signs, a universe where every celestial movement, every curious birth, held meaning. Night falls over the city. Oil lamps cast flickering light against the plastered walls, and the air cools as desert breezes waft through the open courtyards. Servants tend the lamps, ensuring the palace remains softly illuminated, while guards patrol the outer perimeters. As sleep claims the palace, one might hear the soft murmur of prayers, the occasional hoot of an owl, or the distant hum of the city beyond the palace gates. Here, within these walls, power resides, but so too does transience. The empires of Mesopotamia, for all their grandeur, rose and fell, leaving behind only ruins and the cuneiform impressions of their scribes. With that, we leave the palace behind, its splendor and secrets now resting under layers of earth and time. Imagine, if you will, the caravanserai as it stands in the morning light. Its walls rise from the dusty ground like a stone fortress, solid and unyielding, built to protect both man and beast from the dangers of the open road. The gateway is large enough for a camel laden with goods to pass comfortably. And within the enclosed courtyard, the space is organized with meticulous purpose. As a worker here, your day begins before the sun even crests the horizon. You awaken to the faint chill of desert air before the heat sets in. The first task is always to inspect the gates, ensuring they are secure for in the night. There is always the risk of bandits prowling just beyond the safety of the walls. Then come the animals, the camels, the donkeys, the occasional horses, all needing water, feed, and attention. The animals arrive exhausted, their hides caked with dust, their movements sluggish from days of travel. You must guide them to the stables or the tethering posts, where troughs of water, sometimes scarce, await. The scent of sweat and dung fills the air, mingling with the earthy smell of straw. Travelers, too, emerge from their temporary quarters, their clothing stiff with dust and the long wear of travel. Some are merchants, grumbling over broken pottery or dampened spices. Others are pilgrims, their eyes tired but hopeful. And some are envoys, clutching scrolls and letters bound for distant courts. You are tasked with tending to them all. There are fires to stoke for cooking, mats to lay out, and rooms, little more than stone alcoves, to be swept of dirt and occasional lice. The infestation of vermin is an ever-present challenge. Fleas, lice, and even the occasional scorpion hide in dark corners. And your daily sweeping is as much a battle against these tiny invaders as it is about tidying. There is a kitchen, of sorts, a communal cooking area where stews bubble in wide pots, seasoned with whatever spices the merchants have brought and are willing to spare. Sometimes dates and nuts, sometimes meat, but often lentils and grains form the base of sustenance. By midday, the heat becomes oppressive. The stone walls hold the warmth like an oven, and any shade becomes precious. The rhythm of life slows, merchants rest, animals doze, and you might steal a moment to lean against the coolest wall you can find, listening to the low murmur of foreign tongues exchanging tales and prices, but respite is brief. New caravans arrive as the sun dips lower, bringing fresh waves of activity. Each new group demands space, water, and safety for the night. There are disputes to settle, a merchant who suspects a theft, a camel herder whose beasts have wandered too close to another's. As a worker, you play mediator, guide, and laborer, all in one. Guard duty rotates among you and others. Nights are tense. Bandits know that within these walls lie goods of great value: silk from China, spices from India, glass from Syria. By torchlight, you patrol the perimeter, your eyes adjusting to the dark, ears keen for any unusual sounds beyond the walls. Sleep comes late, often on a thin mat, under the stars if the weather is kind, or huddled in a corner if the winds pick up dust from the plains. Your muscles ache from lifting, guiding, running, and yet there is no day without its work. The life of a caravanserai worker is one of constant movement, and yet, paradoxically, you remain rooted, watching the world pass by in waves of travelers while your own days blur together. And yet, there is a quiet beauty here. The flicker of lanterns in the night, the music of a traveler's flute echoing softly through the courtyard, the scent of cardamom and cloves that sometimes wafts from a merchant's satchel, small reminders that the world is vast, rich, and ever-moving. Such is the rhythm of life within the walls of the Persian caravanserai, a blend of toil, vigilance, and fleeting moments of wonder. Now that we have wandered the dusty courtyards of the Persian caravanserai, let us shift our gaze to one of the most remarkable travelers ever to pass through such places, Ibn Battuta. His name, whispered in the markets and resting places of the medieval Islamic world, evokes visions of distant lands and extraordinary adventures, yet in the quiet, measured tones of history. His life is not merely thrilling. It is a testament to endurance, curiosity, and the restless nature of the human spirit. Imagine, if you will, a young man of just 21 years departing his hometown of Tangier in what is today Morocco. The year is 1325, and the world is large, its boundaries defined not by nation-states as we know them, but by the shifting territories of sultans, khans, and caliphs. Ibn Battuta leaves with a simple goal: to perform the Hajj, pilgrimage to Mecca, a spiritual journey undertaken by many, but one that for him would stretch into nearly 30 years of continuous travel. Picture his early days on the road, passing through the Maghrib, the western part of North Africa. His path would have taken him along the familiar caravan routes, resting in the very caravanserais we explored, hearing the din of multiple languages and the ever-present negotiations of trade. He was not wealthy, relying on the hospitality of scholars, religious communities, and occasionally earning favor through his knowledge of Islamic law, for he was trained as a qadi or judge. His journey carried him to Egypt, where the mighty Cairo beckoned with its sprawling markets, grand mosques, and the imposing silhouette of the pyramids rising just beyond the horizon. One can imagine Ibn Battuta standing on the banks of the Nile, observing the steady flow of boats, the bustle of river life, and the timeless pulse of the great city. From Cairo, he crossed into the Levant, visiting Damascus, a city of gardens and mosques, then onward to Medina and Mecca, where he completed the Hajj. Yet, rather than return home, Ibn Battuta pressed on. The world was still too vast, too filled with wonders to be seen and catalogued. His footsteps echoed through the lands of Persia, to the domains of the Ilkhanate Mongols, whose rule was both feared and respected. He journeyed to Baghdad, once the jewel of the Islamic world, still glimmering despite the scars left by the Mongol invasions. From there, the Silk Road beckoned. Through Central Asia, Ibn Battuta made his way to Samarkand, and Bukhara, cities of gleaming domes and minarets, alive with scholars and artisans. He crossed into India, where he would serve for years as a judge under the Delhi Sultanate, navigating the treacherous politics of the court. His curiosity was boundless. Ibn Battuta ventured even farther, to the Maldives, to Sri Lanka, and eventually to the fabled port of Chuanzhou in China, encountering the remnants of the Yuan dynasty. Along the way, he observed not only the grandeur of courts and the majesty of cities, but also the simplicity of village life, the hardship of sailors on monsoon seas, and the intricacies of distant customs. Throughout his travels, caravanserais and way stations were his constants, the thread that tied together his path. These places, much like the one we first imagined, were where he rested, wrote, listened, and observed. Eventually, after nearly 3 decades, Ibn Battuta returned to Morocco. His memories, however, were too numerous to hold within himself alone. At the request of the Sultan of Morocco, he dictated his experiences to a scribe, producing the Rihla or the Journey, a chronicle that remains one of the most detailed accounts of the medieval world. When we read the Rihla today, we see not just a traveler, but a mirror of his time, a man shaped by faith, curiosity, and the simple need to see what lay beyond the next horizon. And so as we imagine his weary but determined steps retracing routes familiar and new, we prepare to venture into the world that Ibn Battuta often crossed. The ancient cities of Central Asia, some vibrant in his day, now faded into dust and silence. Let us now drift eastward, following in the faint impressions left by travelers like Ibn Battuta. Across the expanse of Central Asia, the Silk Road once threaded together glorious cities, bustling with trade, scholarship, and spiritual pursuits. But time, like wind across the steppe, is unrelenting. Many of these cities, once shining jewels, have faded into quiet ruins, their stones and broken walls half buried beneath the sands and grasses. Yet in their stillness, they hold echoes of lives lived, fortunes made and lost, of cultures that converged and diverged again. Consider Merv, once among the largest and most splendid cities in the world, now a lonely archaeological site in Turkmenistan. In its prime, during the Seljuk Empire of the 11th and 12th centuries, Merv was a center of learning, filled with libraries and grand mosques. Its streets hummed with the movement of scholars debating in Persian and Arabic, of traders carrying silks, spices, and manuscripts. You might imagine walking through its streets when they were alive, passing walls of sun-baked mud brick, arches adorned with glazed tiles and shades of turquoise and cobalt blue. The scent of cooked lamb, spices, and freshly baked bread drifts through alleyways. Donkeys bray, children laugh, and everywhere is the murmur of commerce. Yet, Merv's fortune was not everlasting. Waves of conquest, particularly the arrival of the Mongols in the 13th century, sealed its fate. The city was devastated, its population drastically reduced, and it never recovered its former grandeur. Today, under the sun of the Karakum Desert, its ruins lie exposed, silent testimony to its vanished life. Further east lies Samarkand, still standing in modern Uzbekistan, though transformed across centuries. Even in decay, its architecture dazzles. The Registan Square, with its towering madrasas, remains a symbol of Persianate Islamic art, though much restored. In Ibn Battuta's day, Samarkand was a thriving metropolis, its bazaars filled with Persian carpets, Chinese porcelain, and the quiet hum of astronomical scholars charting the heavens. Then there is Bukhara, another ancient city that continues to live. But beneath its modern rhythms are layers upon layers of history. Bukhara was known for its scholars, its poets, and its resilient merchant class. Its Ark fortress, still standing, once housed emirs in their courts. Narrow alleyways, shaded by wooden latticework, led to caravanserais, mosques, and public baths. Yet many lesser-known cities, places like Nisa, Sogdianas, Penjikant, or Otra, have not withstood time as visibly. Their remains lie half-buried, unearthed by cautious archaeologists brushing away centuries of sediment. Excavations reveal fragments of painted murals, shards of pottery, and crumbling walls, enough to hint at what once was, but never enough to revive it fully in the mind. There is a quiet reverence in these places. Standing amid the ruins, one can hear only the wind, feel the granules of sand that accumulate along foundations, and imagine the distant voices of those who passed through. Perhaps a merchant counting his earnings, a scholar reciting lines of poetry, a caravan leader calling out to his charges. In the stillness of these forgotten cities, the passage of time feels almost tangible, not in great events, but in slow erosion, in the soft crumble of stone, in the way grass retakes once paved courtyards. And yet their memory lingers, preserved not just in stone and dust, but in the stories passed down. Stories like those of Ibn Battuta, of geographers, of poets, who sang of distant Samarkand and Bukhara. As the sun sets behind crumbled towers, let us leave these ruins gently behind, their stones cool in the growing dusk, and turn our thoughts to the world of Persian nobility, where life was not one of hardship, but of elegance, learning, and culinary delights. Now, from the windswept ruins of forgotten cities, we gently cross a threshold. From dust and memory into the refined world of the Persian elite during the Islamic Golden Age. Here, in the shaded gardens of a nobleman's estate or the interior courtyard of a vizier's home, life unfolds at a slower, more measured pace. You are no longer among caravan guards or porters tending weary camels. Instead, imagine yourself entering a hall of polished stone floors, high ceilings, and latticed windows that diffuse the golden afternoon light into soft patterns. This is the home of a vizier, a high-ranking advisor to the sultan or caliph, a figure of both administrative importance and cultural refinement. In medieval Persia, particularly during the Buyid Seljuk or later Timurid periods, such individuals were not only expected to be shrewd in governance, but also to cultivate the arts. Poetry, music, calligraphy, and cuisine were seen as signs of true civilization. The atmosphere in this setting is one of deliberate elegance. Servants move quietly across carpets, placing brass trays of delicacies on low tables. Before you, arranged with care, are bowls of stewed lamb with dried apricots, rice flecked with saffron and barberries, plates of flatbread, yogurt sauces, and small cups filled with a sweet aromatic sherbet. Dining here is not a matter of haste or hunger, it is an act of aesthetic appreciation. Meals are slow, accompanied by conversation and poetry. A court poet may recite lines by Hafez Sadi or Rudaki, their verses floating gently through the air like incense. Others discuss matters of astronomy, medicine, or metaphysics, quoting the works of Avicenna or Alfarabi, or contemplating the rhythm of the stars. Music might rise softly from the far end of the courtyard. A musician plucks the strings of a cedar or slides a bow across the Comanche, the notes meandering like the curves of calligraphy. This is not music of drama or loud fanfare. It is introspective, almost meditative, intended not to stir the spirit, but to soothe it. The vizier himself may sit cross-legged on a low cushion, dressed in finely embroidered robes, his beard oiled and trimmed. He listens more than he speaks, nodding to comments, offering gentle corrections when debates drift into imprecision. At times, he may dictate a letter to a scribe, its language artful even in matters of taxation or diplomacy. The Persian vizier was, in many ways, a bridge between ruler and subject, between intellect and policy. Beyond the table, one might hear the gentle bubbling of a fountain, a centerpiece in many Persian homes. Water was not only practical but deeply symbolic, a reflection of paradise, of divine order in the midst of the desert world beyond. Cypress trees, pomegranate bushes, and creeping vines climb the walls. The air is faintly perfumed with rosewater and sandalwood. Evenings are for literary salons, or majlis, where invited guests share stories from across the Islamic world. Tales of Indian sages, Greek philosophers, or recent events in Baghdad or Andalusia. Tea is poured, often steeped with mint or other herbs. Lamps are lit, casting a warm amber glow. And as the night deepens, conversation gives way to reflection, then to silence. This world, so carefully maintained, is one of balance, of knowledge and modesty, indulgence and restraint. It is a kind of theater where roles are clear, language is refined, and nothing is ever hurried. And yet, even this life, for all its comforts, is tethered to the passage of time. Dynasties fall, viziers are replaced, the calligraphy fades. But for a moment, Sitting in the stillness of that courtyard surrounded by soft voices and the scent of cardamom and jasmine, there is a sense of timelessness, a quiet pocket of peace within the greater swirl of history. Imagine, if you will, that you awaken before the sun crests the horizon. The air inside your small wooden dwelling is damp and frigid. There is no insulation, only roughly hewn planks chinked with moss. The scent of smoke, sweat, and sea salt clings to everything. You shiver, reaching for a woolen tunic, still slightly damp from yesterday's toil. Outside, a weak, pale light creeps over the horizon. The village around you is little more than a scattering of timber huts, thatched with sod or reeds, clustered along a rocky, uneven shoreline. Mud pools between the structures, churned by the constant passage of feet, both human and animal. Chickens scratch listlessly in the muck. Pigs snuffle near refuse heaps. The air hums with the sharp cry of gulls. Your task today, like most days, is fishing. In this northern climate, the growing season is short and the soil poor. Grains are scarce and vegetables rarer still. The sea is your true harvest, but it is an unforgiving master. You gather your nets, carefully woven from twisted plant fibers and strands of animal sinew. They must be checked daily for holes and wear. Alongside your neighbors, you push your small, narrow boat, the ne'er-do-ward, the surf. The wood creaks under the weight, smeared with pitch to keep out the sea's relentless intrusion. Even the boats themselves smell of tar and damp rot. The sea is no gentle companion. The waves crash against the shore, cold spray lashing exposed skin. There are no waterproof garments here. Wool keeps some of the chill at bay, but never entirely. Your hands red and chapped, grip the oars as you push out beyond the breakers. Fishing is a monotonous, back-breaking ordeal. Hours are spent hauling heavy nets, heavy with the weight of cod, herring, or mackerel, if fortune favors you. If not, the nets return empty, sagging in defeat. The sea is fickle, and hunger never far behind. When the catch is good, the labor is only beginning. The fish must be gutted, salted, and dried on racks, a task that brings with it the stench of brine and decay. The air around the village is perpetually tinged with the smell of drying fish, smoke, and mud. Salt is precious, so every grain must be used wisely. Evenings offer little reprieve. A meager meal of dried fish, occasionally boiled with grains, if any are available, is eaten by the flickering light of a hearth. The smoke seeps into every surface, irritating eyes and lungs. Overhead, the thatch roof is often dark with soot, occasionally dripping with condensation. Lice are constant companions. They thrive in the seams of your tunic, the folds of your bedding. There is no escape from them, only an endless cycle of scratching and discomfort. Bathing is infrequent, done in cold rivers or the sea itself, which hardly provides relief. Illness is common, born from poor nutrition, the damp and constant exposure to the elements. Bones ache early in life. Teeth rot, yet work must continue. To stop is to starve. The seasons bring little variation. In winter, the darkness is near total for months, the cold biting and merciless. Nets freeze. Boats splinter in the ice. In summer, the days stretch endlessly, but the work never lessens. And through it all, the sea whispers, sometimes in gentle waves. Other times in storms that tear boats apart and claim lives without ceremony. This is life in a Viking fishing village. Not the glory of raids or distant kingdoms, but a steady, grueling existence. A cycle of cold, hunger, and toil, where survival is an accomplishment in itself. Now, as you settle back into your mind's journey, feel the weight of that damp tunic, the salt-crusted air, and the rhythmic motion of the sea beneath a wooden hull. Let these sensations drift with you as we prepare to journey beyond to the saga of a man who dared to leave these shores behind. Leif Erikson, the Norse explorer who sought lands across the ocean's edge. Let us now leave behind the cramped fishing villages and turn our gaze westward, across the steel-gray expanse of the North Atlantic. It is here that we encounter the story of Leif Erikson, the son of Eric the Red, and the man who, long before Columbus, set sail to lands beyond the known horizon. Imagine yourself aboard a longship, its slender frame heaving against the waves. The sky above is low and brooding, and the salty spray of the sea constantly kisses your face. The timbers of the vessel groan with each swell, while the rhythmic creak of oars and the slap of water form a ceaseless backdrop. This was the world of Leif Erikson, where the horizon was both a promise and a peril. Leif was born around the year 970 in Iceland, but his destiny was forged further west, in Greenland, where his father, Eric the Red, had founded a colony after being exiled for manslaughter. The Greenland settlement was harsh, hemmed in by ice and cold, but it was also a frontier, a stepping stone to yet more distant shores. We know of Leif largely through the Icelandic sagas, particularly the saga of the Greenlanders and the saga of Eric the Red. These tales, though shrouded in the mists of oral tradition, offer us a glimpse of his ventures. Leif is said to have heard of lands further west from a merchant named Bjarni Herjolfsson, who had glimpsed unfamiliar shores but had not landed. Inspired, Leif prepared his own expedition, gathering men, supplies, and a sturdy ship designed for both sailing and rowing. Their journey was fraught with danger. The North Atlantic is an unforgiving realm. Icebergs loom like silent sentinels. Storms brew with little warning, and the cold sinks into the bones. Navigation was by the stars, the sun, and the flight of birds and art, both intuitive and uncertain. Yet after days and nights upon the restless sea, Leif and his crew sighted land. First came a place of rocky shores and flat stones, which he named Helgeland, thought to be present-day Baffin Island. Then Markland, a forested coast likely Labrador. Finally, they reached a land of milder climate, where wild grapes supposedly grew in abundance. They called it Vinland. Historians debate the precise location, but many believe it corresponds to Newfoundland in modern Canada. Here, Leif and his men built temporary shelters, known as ear or leafes booths. They explored, gathered resources, and perhaps engaged with the indigenous peoples. Though the sagas speak vaguely of such encounters, the experience was bittersweet. While the land was rich, the threat of conflict, isolation, and the hardship of sustaining a distant outpost loomed large. Eventually, Leif returned to Greenland, his ships laden with timber and other goods. He was hailed as Leif the Lucky, though whether luck was truly on his side is a matter of perspective. His Vinland venture did not spark a lasting colony. The distances were too vast, the ties to home too tenuous. In Greenland, Leif inherited his father's estate and responsibilities. His days became those of a leader overseeing a fragile settlement clinging to the icebound coast. Unlike the heroes of legend, his later life fades into obscurity, his name remembered more for a fleeting brush with distant shores than for lasting dominion. And yet, in his quiet way, Leif embodied the Viking spirit of exploration, not through plunder, but through the simple, restless urge to know what lay beyond the horizon. Let your mind adrift now to the wind-scoured coasts of Greenland. Landscape both stark and majestic, where jagged cliffs plunge into icy fjords, and the land is carpeted with a sparse, muted islet of mosses, lichens, and hardy grasses. It was here, in this raw and remote expanse, that Norse settlers carved out a life for themselves. Beginning with Eric the Red's establishment of the eastern settlement around the year 985, for several centuries they endured. These Greenlanders raised cattle, sheep, and goats, tended small patches of barley, and built churches and halls from stone and sod. They maintained contact with Iceland and, occasionally, Norway, trading walrus ivory hides and other Arctic goods in exchange for iron, timber, and luxuries like wine and cloth. And yet, by the 15th century, they had vanished. Imagine walking through the crumbling remnants of these settlements, the collapsed walls of a stone church, the faint outlines of turf homes, all softened by centuries of grass and snow. The wind carries whispers of voices long gone. What happened to these hardy people? Archaeologists and historians have puzzled over this for generations, piecing together clues from the soil, from bones, and from scant written records. The mystery unfolds in layers of climate, ecology, culture, and contact. One significant factor was climate. Around the 14th century, the northern hemisphere entered what we now call the Little Ice Age. Winters grew harsher, summers shorter, and the growing season contracted. For a society already living on the environmental edge, this shift was devastating. Crops failed more often. The herds, so vital for meat, milk, and hides, weakened in the cold. Famine stalked the settlements. But climate alone does not explain everything. The Greenland Norse also faced isolation. As Europe's political and economic centers shifted, interest in the distant Greenland outposts waned. Supply ships became fewer, and essential trade networks weakened. Without a steady influx of iron, tools broke and could not be easily replaced. Without timber, they could not repair ships or buildings. There is also evidence of environmental mismanagement. The Norse settlers, accustomed to the farming techniques of Norway and Iceland, cleared forests and overgrazed pastures, leading to soil erosion. What had once been green valleys gradually turned barren, making sustenance even more precarious. Contact, or the lack thereof, with neighboring cultures is another piece of the puzzle. The Norse had intermittent encounters with the Inuit, particularly the Thule people, who were far better adapted to the Arctic environment. The Thule used kayaks, harpoons, and seal hunting techniques that the Norse never adopted. While these contacts could have been opportunities for exchange, they may have been marked by competition, misunderstanding, or even hostility. In the end, the settlements dwindled. The western settlement was abandoned first by the mid-14th century. The eastern settlement lingered a while longer, but by the 1400s, it too was empty. A haunting story from an Icelandic account describes the last wedding held in Greenland, after which the church fell silent. Excavations of graves in Greenland reveal another poignant detail. The bones of the last Norse settlers show signs of malnutrition, particularly among children. The diet shifted more toward marine resources, fish and seal meat, but perhaps too late to reverse the decline. And then, one day, the last inhabitant of the eastern settlement looked out over the fjord, saw no ships on the horizon, no signs of rescue or trade. The farms lay empty, the churches cold and quiet. Today, the ruins of these colonies still stand, solitary against the elements, visited by researchers and the occasional traveler. The bones remain, the stones remain. But the people are going to leaving behind an enduring question of survival, adaptation, and loss. As we leave behind the faded traces of Greenland's Norse, let us now turn our attention to the other side of the Viking world, not in isolation or hardship, but in the warmth and glow of a winter feast. For even in these hard times, the Norse knew how to gather, to share, and to celebrate under the timbered roofs of their longhouses. Now let us step out of the harsh winds of the Greenland coast and imagine yourself instead on the mainland of Scandinavia. The air is cold, but the landscape is forested, dotted with villages and homesteads. Snow drapes across rooftops, and smoke curls lazily from the peaks of longhouses. Tonight, you are invited not as a servant or fisherman, but as a guest to the hall of a Viking jarl, a local chieftain of some renown. His longhouse is the heart of the settlement, its wooden frame broad and tall, with walls insulated by layers of sod and timber beams darkened by smoke and time. As you approach, the air grows warmer. The entrance is guarded by intricately carved wooden post dragons and serpents entwined in Norse artistry. Inside, a roaring central hearth runs the length of the hall, the flames sending sparks upward into the smoky rafters. The scent of burning pine mingles with roasting meat and the faint sweetness of mead. Along the walls, benches and tables are crowded with guests. Warriors, farmers, skald storytellers, and the Jarl's household. The Jarl himself sits at the high seat, carved with animal motifs, draped in furs, and marked by the silver ring that signifies his status. His presence is commanding but not harsh. He listens, observes, and when needed, his voice cuts through the murmur of the crowd. The rhythm of such a feast is measured, but hearty. Large platters of boiled and roasted meats are passed around: venison, boar, and sometimes the ever-present salted fish. There are stews thick with barley and root vegetables, like bowls of skyr, a tangy yogurt, accompany the heavier fare. Breads, rough and dark, are baked from whatever grains the harvest allowed. And then, of course, there is the mead sweetened with honey, golden and warming. Flows freely, poured into wooden cups and horns, often spiced with herbs. The toasts begin with solemnity, honoring the gods like Odin, Thor, Freya, but soon give way to more raucous declarations of valor and boasts of deeds both true and exaggerated. Between courses and toasts, the skald takes his place near the hearth, reciting sagas in a low melodic chant. The tales are of ancient heroes, of voyages across treacherous seas, of creatures both real and imagined. The rhythm of his voice, steady and measured, seems to sync with the flicker of the flames, lulling listeners into reverie. You can almost feel the heat of the fire against your face, the weight of the fur cloak across your shoulders, the hum of conversation. Blending with the occasional laughter or the slap of a hand on a wooden table, the feast is not just indulgence, it is a necessary relief from the brutal cold and the labors of daily life. It is a reaffirmation of bonds, a time when disputes might be set aside and when alliances are quietly forged over shared drink and stories. The Jarl listens, gathers information, assesses loyalties. Underneath the merriment lies a current of politics, of social positioning. Music sometimes fills the hall lyres and flutes carved from bone or wood. The melodies are simple, repetitive, soothing. Perhaps a woman sings in a high, clear voice, a ballad of lost love or a warrior's farewell. The room listens, hushed, the music floating like mist through the smoky air. As the night deepens, some guests doze where they sit, their heads resting against the wooden beams. The hearth's heat ebbs slowly, but the comfort lingers. Outside, the wind howls through the trees, but here, within these walls, there is warmth, companionship, and the steady certainty of tradition. The feast will end with final toasts, more solemn once again, remembering ancestors and those who died in battle. The Jarl might offer parting words, reminders of duty of the seasons to come, raids yet to be planned, or harvests yet to be secured. And when the fires burn low and the hall falls quiet, you too might find a corner to rest your head, the din of the evening still echoing faintly in your ears. Rhythmic murmur like the lapping of waves against a wooden ship. Thus ends our evening in the Longhouse, a world of harsh survival softened, if only briefly, by food, fire, and fellowship. Imagine yourself awakening before dawn in the cramped barracks of a Roman fort along the empire's frontier. Perhaps along the stark line of Hadrian's Wall in the north of Britain, where stone and turf stretch across the landscape, separating the Roman world from the tribes beyond. The chill in the air is constant, even in summer. The mornings are damp and heavy with mist. In winter, the cold gnaws at your bones, persistent and unkind. Your bedinia, straw-stuffed mattress retains little warmth. And your cloak, though thick, does little to shield you from the dampness that seeps into everything. You are not alone. The barracks are shared, the air thick with the mingled sense of sweat, damp wool, and smoke from the small hearth struggling to keep the cold at bay. Armor and weapons are stored nearby your gladius, a short, sturdy sword, your pilum, a heavy throwing spear, and of course the rectangular shield, the scutum, worn from drills and skirmishes. There is no sleeping in. The day begins early, marked by the sound of the bucina, a curved horn whose call echoes through the fort, summoning soldiers to rise, assemble, and begin their duties. The morning routine is disciplined and relentless. Inspections ensure that every soldier's equipment is in good condition, shields uncracked, blades sharp, armor polished. Discipline is enforced with a severity that borders on cruelty. A soldier found negligent could face harsh punishments, floggings, extra duties, or in severe cases, death by execution, sometimes at the hands of one's own comrades. After inspection, there are drills marching in formation, practicing maneuvers with shield and sword, rehearsing the discipline of the testudo. The tortoise formation, where shields interlock above and around to create a moving wall. This is not a mere performance. On the frontier, such discipline can mean the difference between life and death. Then comes the day's assigned labor. Forts require constant maintenance. Ditches need clearing, palisades must be repaired, and roads, those enduring Roman roads, need upkeep. Some days you may be tasked with patrolling the wall or venturing beyond it to scout the unfamiliar terrain. Each step beyond the boundary is heavy with the unspoken threat of ambush. The diet is plain and repetitive. Porridge of grains, sometimes enriched with legumes or bits of salted pork. Bread is coarse, baked in communal ovens, and water is often mixed with vinegar to ward off illness. On occasion, there is wine or beer, but these are not luxuries, merely variations in a monotonous routine. The social life of a Roman soldier on the frontier is tightly regulated. You might share stories with your contubernium, the small group of 8 soldiers you bunk with, or maybe gambling, dice games played on scratched boards, or the occasional festival when rations improve slightly and music fills the cold air. But always, there is the looming presence of discipline. Mutiny and insubordination are dealt with swiftly. Sometimes by decimation, the execution of every 10th man in a unit as a gruesome warning. Fear, in many ways, is a tool of order. And then there is the weather, the ever-present bone-deep chill. Hadrian's Wall, for example, stands exposed to harsh northern winds. Rain lashes against stone, snow settles in uneven drifts, and the fog can be so thick that you might not see more than a few paces ahead. Fires burn constantly, but warmth is fleeting. Night patrols are perhaps the most taxing. In the dark, the imagination conjures shadows into threats. The howls of wolves, the distant drum beats from beyond the wall, the quiet rustle of leaves. Every sound is a reminder of the peril that surrounds you. When you are not on duty, you might find moments of quiet writing letters home, if you are literate, carving wood, or mending your gear. Yet even these small acts are shadowed by the inevitability of returning to the routine. A Roman soldier's career could last 25 years. A lifetime of cold mornings, harsh discipline, and the unchanging landscape of the frontier. And when discharge finally comes, it often brings a grant of land in some distant province, final reward for years of service, if you've lived long enough to claim it. The rhythm of their lives was one of endurance, of strict hierarchy and simple pleasures when they could be found. Life on the frontier was not glorious. It was a quiet, relentless struggle against the elements, against boredom, and against the ever-present possibility of violence. Now that we have walked in the heavy boots of these frontier soldiers, let us turn our attention to a darker chapter in Rome's military history, a tragedy of lost legions of ambition. Undone in the shadowy depths of a German forest, let us now leave the wind-battered walls of the frontier and journey deep into the misty forests of Germania, vast, dense expanse of towering trees, tangled undergrowth, and winding rivers. It is here, amidst the dim green canopy, one of Rome's most harrowing military disasters unfolded, the calamity of the Teutoburg Forest. The year was 09 CE. The Roman Empire, confident in its might, sought to expand its dominion deeper into the wild territories beyond the Rhine River. The man entrusted with this endeavor was Publius Quinctilius, Verussa's seasoned administrator, but less adept in the art of war. Verussa was tasked with governing the newly annexed provinces and ensuring their compliance with Roman rule. At his command were 3 full legions, approximately 15 to 20,000 men alongside auxiliary troops, cavalry, and a cumbersome baggage train. These soldiers, veterans of many campaigns, marched not in tight, disciplined formations, but strung out along a meandering forest path. Their usual strict order gave way to a stretched, vulnerable line as the dense forest pressed in on all sides, funneling them through narrow tracks. Unknown to Varus, betrayal had already taken root. A chieftain of the Carusi tribe, known to the Romans as Arminius, pledged loyalty to Rome while secretly rallying Germanic tribes against them. Arminius had studied Roman military tactics and knew precisely where and how to strike. As the Roman column pushed deeper into the forest, rain began to fall. The sky, already obscured by the thick canopy, grew darker. Mud clung to sandals and wheels, turning the path into a mire. The soldiers, weighed down by armor, shields, and equipment, moved sluggishly, their discipline eroding with each sodden step. Then, amid the dripping trees, the Germans struck. It was not a single decisive battle, but a series of ambushes, stretched over several days. From behind trees, from above ridges, and out of the undergrowth, warriors attacked in swift, brutal strikes. The Romans, unable to form their defensive formations, found themselves exposed. Shields were unwieldy in the cramped spaces between trees. The cavalry could not maneuver. Arrows, spears, and slashing blades fell upon them in relentless waves. Imagine the sounds not of an orderly battle, but of confusion. Shouts of commands drowned in the clash of metal, the cries of the wounded, the crack of breaking branches. The forest seemed alive with menace, every shadow a potential threat. Rain continued to fall. Fires could not be lit. Supplies dwindled. The Romans tried to fortify makeshift camps, building ramparts from whatever they could find. But the Germans pressed on, harrying them at every turn. Fatigue set in, along with the gnawing fear that there would be no escape. On the final day, the remnants of the legions made a last, desperate stand near a place called the Calcarees Hill, surrounded, exhausted and disheartened. The Roman soldiers fell one by one. Their discipline collapsed, their ranks shattered. Varus, realizing the enormity of the disaster, is said to have fallen upon his own sword rather than be taken captive. When the killing ended, the forest floor was littered with the dead. Weapons, armor, and standards, the symbolic eagles of the legions, were taken as trophies. The tribes had dealt Rome a staggering blow. For years afterward, the forest remained a place of dread for the Romans. When Germanicus, a Roman general, later led expeditions to recover the lost standards, he found the bones of the fallen strewn across the land, bleaching under the open sky, unburied and exposed. Skulls, shattered shields, and fragments of once proud standards lay as mute testimony to the catastrophe. The psychological impact on Rome was profound. Emperor Augustus, upon hearing the news, is said to have wandered his palace, crying, "Quintili Var, legions retha." Quintilius Varus, give me back my legions, futile lament for soldiers who would never return. The loss of the 3 legions halted Roman expansion into Germania permanently. The Rhine River remained the boundary of empire, a frontier that would never be pushed further east. Yet in time, nature reclaimed the battlefield. Trees grew over the scars of conflict. Forest became quiet once more, save for the wind stirring the leaves, a natural shroud over human tragedy. As we leave the shadowy glades of the Teutoburg forest, our path leads us not into more bloodshed, but into the careful work of uncovering the past. Our next destination is Vindolanda, a Roman fort along the British frontier, where archaeologists have unearthed traces of everyday life, written not in blood but in ink and leather, preserved in the earth for centuries. As we step quietly away from the ghostly echoes of the Teutoburg forest, our journey brings us once again to the northern edge of the Roman world, specifically to the wind-swept plains of northern Britannia, where the remnants of a Roman fort known as Vindolanda sleep beneath layers of soil. Vindolanda was one of several forts positioned along the frontier long before the famed Hadrian S-Wall was completed, established in the late 1st century CE. This site served as a garrison post for auxiliary troops, those non-Roman citizens who fought under the empire's banner in hopes of citizenship and favor. If you can imagine yourself walking there now, you'd find a landscape of low stone walls, their former grandeur, long since softened by moss, grass, and the inexorable creep of time. But beneath the surface, Vindolanda held secrets far richer than its quiet, ruined appearance suggests. You see, the site's peculiar soil composition, thick, damp, and almost airless in places, created a near-perfect environment for the preservation of organic materials that usually vanish with the centuries. With leather and even ink on fragile slivers of wood have survived here, giving us an extraordinary window into the lives of people who once called this distant outpost home. Perhaps the most famous of these discoveries is the collection of Vindolanda tablets, thin, postcard-sized sheets of wood upon which men and women scribbled their everyday thoughts, official records, requests, and personal invitations. Imagine a soldier writing a letter home, not with romantic flourish, but practical inquiries about supplies, boots, or the state of affairs in distant provinces. One such letter stands out. A birthday invitation from Claudia Severa, the wife of a commanding officer, to her friend Sulpicia Lepidina. Beautifully cursive Latin, she invites her to celebrate, wishing her well. It is the oldest known writing in Latin by a woman, and reading it feels like listening to a whispered conversation across 2 millennia. The tablets also reveal the bureaucracy that sustained military life, inventory lists of grain and beer, records of duty rotations, and even complaints about the quality of boots supplied to the troops. There are glimpses of banter and petty rivalries of soldiers who grumbled about their officers or the dreadful weather, much like employees anywhere across any age. Moving beyond the wooden letters, archaeologists have found an astonishing array of leather goods, shoes in particular. Scores of them, ranging from heavy-duty boots to finely crafted sandals, tell of a diverse population living within the fort's walls. footwear for men, women, and children alike. The presence of families, not just warriors, begins to emerge from these findings. There are combs, gaming boards, and delicate hairpin tokens of ordinary domestic life. Scraps of textiles suggest the bright, rich dyes that once colored their clothing, even here on the damp fringes of empire. From the remains of their meals, animal bones, shells, and seeds, we know what they ate. Oysters brought from the coast, local grains, and the ever-present beer and wine that oiled the wheels of Roman leisure. It is easy to imagine, then, the rhythm of a day at Vindolanda. The fort would have stirred to life with the morning as soldiers prepared for their drills. Smiths hammered in workshops, cooking fires were stoked, and the clang of blacksmiths' hammers echoed against the stone. Children's laughter, occasional and fleeting, would punctuate the air as they played in the safer corners of the settlement. Women, both native Britons and those who had traveled from other corners of the empire, might be seen spinning wool, preparing food, or maintaining the small sanctuaries to household gods. The mingling of cultures was evident latent, spoken alongside local dialects, Roman customs blending with native traditions. Yet despite these glimpses of warmth and normalcy, life here was not easy. The winters were long, wet, and cold. Supplies could dwindle. News from Rome took months to arrive, if it came at all. The soldiers stationed here were always aware that the wall beyond their fort marked not the edge of the world, but the beginning of barbarian lands, where hostile tribes might someday gather. And still, amidst this harshness, there was resilience. The daily rituals of writing, eating, repairing, remembering gave these men and women a structure, a rhythm that kept the encroaching wildness of the frontier at bay. Today, Vindolanda continues to yield its secrets. New excavations reveal more about this distant post, an enduring testament to how ordinary lives, preserved by chance in the soil, speak as loudly as the grand histories of emperors and generals. As we gently close the ledger on Vindolanda, let us make our way southward, away from forts and battle lines. Step inside the grand villas of Rome itself, where patricians reclined on cushioned couches, and feasts flowed with wine, laughter, and the sharp sting of political intrigue. Now, imagine yourself transported far from the misty moors and cold stone of Vindolanda. The landscape warms, the air softens, and the scenery transforms into the sun-drenched hills of the Italian countryside. Vineyards stretch in orderly rows, olive groves sway gently with the breeze, and grand villas rise above it all stately, homes of Rome's elite. You stand at the threshold of such a villa, the property of a wealthy patrician. These expansive estates were more than mere residencies. They were the centerpieces of wealth, power, and influence. To enter one was to step into a world of opulence, but also of carefully choreographed performance. The approach is lined with marble statues and cypress trees. Fountains tinkle softly, their streams of water a delicate background to the murmur of servants and the occasional trill of birds. The walls of the villa, painted with vibrant frescoes, display mythological scenes, heroic deeds, and idyllic, pastoral landscapes art that reminded the viewer of civilization's grandeur, even in repose. Within the villa, the triclinium, the formal dining room, awaits. Picture it. A large, airy space, its walls painted in deep reds, golds, and blacks, with intricate mosaics underfoot. Reclining couches are arranged on three sides of a low central table, where servants bustle to and fro, laying out platters of food, pitchers of wine, and delicate glassware. The guests, attired in flowing togas of spotless white or soft hues, recline on their sides, propped up by cushions. They engage in low conversation, their words carefully chosen. For the banquet is not just about nourishment, it is a stage for wit, political maneuvering, and the subtle dance of influence. The courses begin simply, perhaps olives, figs, and cheeses accompanied by warm, crusty bread. Then come fish, game meats, and exotic delicacies, all prepared with spices brought from the far corners of the empire. Garum, the famed fermented fish sauce, is generously drizzled, its pungent aroma an essential marker of Roman cuisine. Wine flows freely, but it is rarely drunk, need always diluted with water, and sometimes with honey or spices, ensuring that the mind remains sharp enough for the evening's debates. The host, ever vigilant, ensures that the right people are seated together. that rivalries are not inflamed, and that the conversation sparkles just enough to impress. Amidst these discussions, topics range widely. The latest news from the Senate, the movements of the emperor, the outcome of gladiatorial games, or the latest literary work being recited in fashionable circles. A poet might be invited to perform, his verses filling the room with measured cadence. Or a philosopher, drawing murmurs of agreement or soft chuckles of polite dissent. But beneath this polished veneer, intrigue simmers. Every comment, every gesture is measured. Friendships can be forged or broken over a shared cup of wine. Alliances might be hinted at through a passing remark, while enmities are masked with cordial smiles. The servants, attentive yet invisible, maintain the flow of the evening. Their steps are soft, their eyes lowered, ensuring that the spell of leisure and control remains unbroken. In the kitchen, slaves labor over clay ovens and braziers, preparing the next course, their work unnoticed by those enjoying its fruits. As the banquet stretches into the evening, the conversation loosens. Music is played, perhaps the soft strains of a lyre or the haunting notes of a flute. Dancers may perform their movements graceful and hypnotic in the flickering lamplight. The air grows heavy with the scents of perfumes, wine, and the lingering traces of rich food. Eventually the evening winds down. Guests bid their farewells with practiced courtesies, departing into the night with their reputations either burnished or bruised by the evening's social games. The host retires, satisfied if his position feels just a little more secure, his influence subtly extended. In the quiet that follows, the villa settles into shadow. The torches are extinguished, the laughter and music fade, and the servants quietly clear the remnants of excess. The villa sleeps, its marble halls now silent, awaiting the next day's duties and the next evening's theater of power. And so, from the chill of distant frontiers to the warmth of patrician halls, we have traveled the breadth of the Roman experience of soldiers and statesmen, of hardship and indulgence, of the ever-turning wheels of empire. Imagine yourself standing at the edge of a cold, gray shore. The sky is heavy with low clouds, the air salted and damp. Before you stretches the restless sea, a vast expanse of gray-blue, both a provider and a peril. Behind you, clustered wooden huts cling to the coastline, their thatched roofs hunched against the ever-present wind. You are in an Edo-Ira fishing village, perhaps on the rugged coasts of Tohoku or the narrow inlets of the Seto Inland Sea. The village smells of brine and damp wood, fish scales and smoke from cooking fires. Here, life revolves entirely around the sea and its fickle bounty. Each day begins before the sun has lifted its heavy head above the horizon. The men rise early, their limbs stiff from cold and labor, their simple garments smelling faintly of salt and fish oil. They gather in small groups, voices low, preparing their narrow wooden boats long, shallow craft shaped to slice through both wave and current. Nets, woven and mended with painstaking care, are coiled and inspected, the rough hemp cord abrasive beneath calloused fingers. Fishing is no leisure pursuit. The work is constant and unyielding. Out on the waves, men cast their nets in rhythmic motions, hauling them back with aching shoulders and backs strained from repetition. The nets are heavy, whether laden with slippery, writhing fish or soaked with seawater alone. Some days the catch is plentiful, silver flashes of sardines, mackerel, or bonito filling the hold. Other days the sea yields little, as if teasing those who rely on its mercy, and the sea itself is no gentle friend. Tsunami-suden, monstrous waves, are an ever-looming threat, capable of sweeping away entire villages in moments. Storms can arise with little warning, churning the waters into chaotic tempests. The fishermen, their boats fragile against nature's fury, row desperately to shore, knowing that not all will make it back. On land, the rhythm of hardship continues. The nets, once used, must be cleaned and repaired, a task that falls to both men and women. Long hours are spent untangling knots, reweaving torn cords, and preparing the next day's tools. The scent of wet rope mingles with that of drying fish, strung up on racks to cure in the salty air. Diet here is monotonous, yet sustaining rice. When available, mixed with dried fish, seaweed, and occasional vegetables, if the small gardens bear fruit, yet even the rice is not truly theirs. Much of it, paid as taxes, is gathered and measured by samurai tax collectors, men who arrive with stern faces and tally books, indifferent to the villagers' struggles. Payment is expected whether the harvest is rich or poor, whether the sea has been kind or cruel. The villagers live under the constant gaze of hierarchy and duty. Each person knows their place, whether as a fisherman, a net mender, or a market seller. There is little room for social mobility. Sons inherit the trade of their fathers. Daughters marry within the village or nearby, continuing the cycle without complaint, or at least without open dissent. At night, the village rests beneath the stars, though the sound of the sea never fully ceases. Fires crackle in small hearths, their smoke curling through the gaps in wooden walls. Families gather, their conversations quiet, voices softened by fatigue. There may be a brief moment of music, perhaps a shakuhachi flute played softly, or the gentle strumming of a shamisen. But even these pleasures are muted, mere flickers of respite. And yet, amidst the toil, there is an enduring beauty, a connection to the rhythms of nature. The knowledge of tides and winds passed down through generations. There is pride in a well-woven net, in a successful catch, in a meal shared among kin. Life is harsh, yes, but it is also steady, familiar in its repetitions. Imagine yourself resting here, the sea murmuring endlessly in the background, the cool night air pressing gently against your skin. The day's labors are done, and though tomorrow promises more of the same, for now there is quiet. With that, we drift from the humble fishing village to a very different tale of duty, honor, and consequence, one that has echoed through centuries. Let us now explore the rise and fall of the 47 Ronin. Now, imagine leaving behind the salt-kissed breeze of the fishing village, traveling inland, where grand gates mark the entrance to a daimyo's estate. Here the air feels stiller, the trees carefully manicured, the gravel paths swept in meticulous patterns. It is in such a world of samurai honor and rigid codes that the story of the 47 Ronin begins, a tale both famous and quietly tragic. In the early 18th century, Japan was under the rule of the Tokugawa shogunate, a time when the samurai class still held great prestige, though the world around them was slowly shifting. Peace, brought by the shogunate's stability, left many samurai without wars to fight, their swords more symbols of duty than tools of battle. And yet, beneath the surface of this peace, tensions of pride, power, and reputation continue to stir. At the heart of this tale is Lord Asano Naganori Daimyo of the Akko domain, a relatively minor lord, summoned to the grand city of Edo today, known as Tokyo. He was tasked with a ceremonial duty, to host and entertain emissaries of the imperial court, a task requiring great propriety and expense. To guide him, the shogunate assigned a senior official, Kira Yoshinaka, who was known for his strictness, and, according to some, his arrogance. Imagine Lord Asano, a man of proud but restrained disposition, navigating the labyrinthine etiquette of the shogun's palace, under the watchful eye of Kira. The accounts say that Kira was dissatisfied with the gifts and respect Asano offered, feeling slighted by the perceived lack of deference. Tensions grew, quietly beneath formal greetings and polite bows. One day, the pressure broke. In the corridors of Edo Castle, an environment where drawing a sword was strictly forbidden, Lord Asano attacked Kira with his short sword. The reasons remain debated in insult, provocation, or perhaps accumulated frustration. Kira survived, wounded but alive. Asano, however, was immediately sentenced to commit seppuku ritual suicide to atone for this grave breach of conduct. Thus, Asano's estate was seized, his family dishonored, and his samurai retainers left masterless ronin, wandering men without a lord. It is here that the slow, deliberate unfolding of their famous revenge began. 47 of these ronin, led by Oishi Kuranosuke, made a solemn pact to avenge their lord's death. Yet they knew they could not act immediately. The shogunate watched carefully, and any open plotting would bring swift retribution. So they waited. For nearly 2 years, the ronin scattered and disguised themselves. Some became merchants, others took menial jobs. Oishi himself feigned a life of dissipation, visiting tea houses and appearing to abandon the samurai code. It was all a careful deception, meant to lull their enemies into complacency. Imagine the patience required, the weight of duty carried silently through daily toil and pretense. The Ronin must have lived each day under suspicion, their purpose a secret burden. Then one snowy night in December 1702, they struck. Coordinating their efforts, the 47 Ronins stormed Kira's mansion. The night air was sharp and cold, snow muffling their footsteps as they climbed walls and broke through gates. In the end, they found Kira hiding, and there, in keeping with their pledge, they ended his life not in a rage, but with the formality their code demanded. With their duty fulfilled, the Ronin did not flee. Instead, they marched to the grave of Lord Asano in Sengakuji Temple, presenting Kira's head as a symbolic offering of loyalty. They waited for their fate, knowing well what was to come. Their actions sparked a nationwide debate. Were they criminals for breaking the peace? Or paragons of samurai virtue, upholding loyalty beyond death? The shogunate, unwilling to endorse open rebellion, yet mindful of their honorable reputation, decreed that the Ronin too must die. But they were granted the dignity of seppuku rather than execution. And so, one by one, they took their own lives, their story entering the fabric of Japanese culture, told and retold in plays, poems, and later film. The 47 Ronin became a symbol not of victory, but of resolve, honor, and the inescapable weight of duty. Even today, at Sengakuji Temple, their graves remain. Visitors leave offerings, burn incense, and reflect on the quiet strength of their sacrifice. Now, as we leave behind this somber tale of loyalty and consequence, let us turn our thoughts to another form of dedication, not of warriors, but of artisans. In the shadows of forges and amidst the ringing of hammers on steel, the secrets of the samurai sword were forged. As we step away from the somber stones of Sengakuji Temple, imagine yourself instead standing at the threshold of a small forge tucked in the fold of a misty valley. The air is thick with the scent of burning charcoal, and the distant clang of metal against metal echoes like a steady heartbeat. This is the domain of the swordsmith keepers of one of Japan's most revered and enigmatic traditions. The samurai sword, or katana, is not merely a weapon. To those who crafted them, wielded them, and revered them, it was a living spirit forged from fire, steel, and devotion. But the making of such a blade was no simple matter of melting metal and striking with a hammer. It was an intricate, almost spiritual process, shaped by ritual, skill, and generations of guarded knowledge. Imagine the swordsmith at work, his hair bound tightly, his face lit by the soft orange glow of the forge. Before any hammer is lifted, the smith performs quiet rituals, invoking the kami, or spirits, to bless the work ahead. Purification rites cleanse both the body and the workspace, reflecting the belief that the sword is not merely forged but born. The materials themselves tell a story of complexity. Japanese steel, or tamahagen, is smelted from iron sand, yielding a material of varying carbon content. To the untrained eye, it is unremarkable dark, coarse, impure. But the swordsmith sees its potential. The steel is folded and reforged multiple times, often dozens. This process isn't just symbolic. It serves to distribute carbon evenly and eliminate impurities. With each fold, the steel gains strength, flexibility, and a distinct grain pattern known as hutta, faintly visible like ripples on water. The rhythm of folding, hammering, and heating creates a meditation of movement and sound. The forge burns with a specific heat, carefully watched not too hot, lest the steel burns, and not too cool, lest it becomes brittle. The swordsmith listens, not just with ears, but with years of inherited intuition, gauging the metal's readiness by its color and resonance. Once the desired structure is achieved, the blade is shaped and coated with a special clay mixture thicker on the spine, thinner along the edge. This prepares it for the crucial moment of quenching, where the blade, glowing a dull orange, is plunged into water. This sudden cooling hardens the edge while leaving the spine slightly softer, creating a balance between cutting power and flexibility. The quenching process also births the ham and the wavy, cloud-like line that forms along the blade, unique to each sword, almost like a fingerprint of the smith's technique. But the creation does not end there. The sword is carefully polished by a specialist, sometimes over weeks, revealing the subtle patterns within the steel and sharpening the blade to a keen, almost ethereal edge. This polishing is an art in itself, emphasizing the blade's beauty and function without compromising either. Throughout this process, silence and focus dominate the workshop. The swordsmith is not just crafting a tool, but embodying a philosophy, a harmony between strength and grace, life and death, art and utility. The finished katana is then mounted, often with equally exquisite craftsmanship, lacquered scabbards, ray-skin grips, intricate guards called tsuba. Each component tells its own story of artistry and care, forming an object that transcends mere weaponry. To hold such a blade was to hold a lineage, a repository of skill passed from master to apprentice, guarded across centuries. And even though the samurai class eventually faded, the reverence for these swords endures, relics of an era where steel carried not just sharpness, but spirit. Now, from the dim glow of the forge, let us move into the elegance of the manor house. For among the samurai elite and their patrons, another ritual reigns supreme, not of war, but of refinement. The tea ceremony and the luxury of a daimyo's mansion await us, where precision and aesthetic grace governed every movement. Imagine now that we have stepped out of the warmth of the swordsmith's forge and into a different world entirely. The air grows still, fragrant with a delicate mixture of incense and the faint earthy scent of tatami mats. The floors are meticulously clean, and the sliding shoshi doors whisper as they open, revealing a space of subdued elegance. This is the residence of a daimyo, one of the powerful feudal lords of Edo period. Japan, a world far removed from the toil of fishing villages or the clang of sword-making. The daimyo's mansion is a labyrinth of quiet corridors, manicured gardens, and artfully arranged rooms. Each space is designed with intention, not for ostentatious display, but for the appreciation of simplicity, of natural materials, and the ephemeral beauty of seasons changing. Here, the aesthetic principle of wabi-sabi reigns, the embrace of imperfection, transience, and quiet beauty. At the heart of this refined world lies the tea ceremony, or chana-yu. Far more than a simple act of drinking tea, this ritual is a choreographed experience of grace, mindfulness, and hospitality. Imagine yourself seated on the floor, knees folded on a soft mat, in a room devoid of unnecessary decoration. Perhaps a single hanging scroll offers a seasonal poem or painting, and a small flower arrangement known as chabanosa quietly in the corner, chosen not for brilliance, but for subtle charm. The host enters with slow, deliberate steps, every motion considered. The utensils, the bamboo whisk, the ceramic tea bowl, the iron kettle each possess their own history and artistry. There is a reverence to these objects, as if they too are participants in the ritual. The host moves with the rhythm of centuries of tradition, each gesture practiced to the point of effortless grace. Hot water is ladled from the kettle, and the powdered green tea, or matcha, is whisked into a vibrant froth. The tea is served with an offering of seasonal sweets, their delicate flavors designed to complement the bitterness of the tea. Silence often reigns, save for the soft sounds of water being poured, the gentle whisking of tea, and the occasional quiet exchange of words. The tea ceremony is not merely about consumption, but about presence, about appreciating the here. And now, the texture of the bowl, the aroma of the tea, the fleeting nature of the moment, it is a performance of harmony, respect, purity, and tranquility, the four principles of the tea ceremony. Beyond the tea room, the daimyo's mansion is a showcase of craftsmanship and taste. Screens painted with landscapes, or scenes of courtly life, sliding doors inlaid with gold leaf, and lacquerware of deep, lustrous black and red. Gardens, too, are not mere decoration, but carefully composed vistas of rocks, moss, and raked gravel miniature landscapes meant to inspire reflection and serenity. Banquets in the mansion are equally refined. Cuisine in the daimyo's home reflects the culinary arts of the time, multi-course meals known as kizuki, where each dish is presented as an aesthetic experience. Small, beautifully arranged portions showcase seasonal ingredients, river fish, mountain vegetables, delicate broths, and rice, each prepared with precision. These meals are accompanied by music, often played on the koto or shamisen, stringed instruments that produce gentle, flowing sounds that fill the air without overwhelming conversation. Poets and scholars might be invited to recite verse, and discussions on art, philosophy, or the changing seasons offer intellectual nourishment to match the physical. Yet, For all the beauty within these walls, the daimyo's life was not without its own constraints. The shogunate's policy of sankinkata required daimyo to spend alternating years in Edo, the shogun's capital, leaving their families behind as hostages of loyalty. This constant travel, the maintenance of multiple residences, and the need to display wealth and power through art and ceremony were financial and social burdens, as much as they were pleasures. In the quiet of these mansions, one could feel the layered weight of expectations, propriety, and the delicate balance of power that defined Japan's rigid hierarchy. Behind every elegant gesture lay the pressures of status, duty, and the unspoken understanding that appearances must always be maintained. And so, as we leave the polished floors and the subtle scent of incense behind, let us reflect on this journey from the hardship of fishing villages battered by sea and tax collectors, through the fatal honor of the 47 Ronin, to the fiery artistry of swordsmiths, and finally into the hushed elegance of the daimyo's mansion. Picture yourself standing on a barren, wind-swept plateau nearly 4,000 meters above sea level. The air here is thin and sharp, every breath a conscious effort. Before you looms the Cerro Rico, the rich mountain, a hulking, rust-colored peak that dwarfs the scattered settlements at its base. Its slopes are scarred with entrances to tunnels, some wide and yawning, others mere cracks in the earth, leading into the bowels of a mountain that has been hollowed out by centuries of relentless extraction. Imagine waking each day in a cold, cramped shelter, the thin air doing little to warm your lungs overnight. You might be a boy no older than 10, or a man hardened by years of toil, though life expectancy rarely allows for old age here. Your day begins early as faint light creeps across the horizon, and your first task is simple yet brutal. Prepare for another descent into the mountain. Miners tie cloths around their mouths and noses, not for comfort, but for the scant protection it offers against the ever-present dust and choking fumes. Some chew coca leaves, a habit not of indulgence, but necessity. It dulls hunger, staves off exhaustion, and helps one endure the altitude. The bitter taste becomes a familiar companion. Entering the tunnels, the sunlight quickly fades until it is nothing more than a memory. The walls close in, rough-hewn rock pressing on all sides. Flicker of a torch, or in later times the glow of a candle, is your only illumination, making the rock seem alive in the corners of your vision. The air is heavy, stale, and laced with minerals. With each breath you inhale, not just dust, but a cocktail of substances your body was never meant to endure. The deeper you go, the warmer and more suffocating it becomes, until sweat clings to your skin despite the chill above ground. Your tasks vary. Perhaps you are hacking at the rock with a pickaxe, muscles straining with each swing. Or maybe you are responsible for hauling sacks of ore, each one heavier than your own weight, up treacherous shafts where a misstep could send you plummeting into darkness. Some children work as porters, scrambling through tight spaces, their small bodies more suited to the claustrophobic tunnels. There is no regular rest, only stolen moments when exhaustion threatens to overtake you. Water is scarce, the air burns your throat, and yet the work presses on. The ever-present threat of cave-ins keeps your ears tuned to the smallest creak or groan of shifting rock. And then there is the mercury used later in the refining process. Its vapors, unseen but deadly, infiltrate the body slowly, stealing health and life silently over time. Death is constant. It might come in a sudden collapse, or as a slow, relentless deterioration. Lungs weakened, bones brittle, lives shortened. It is said that millions died in these tunnels, so many that the mountain itself earned a grim nickname, the mountain that eats men. Superstition thrives here, born of desperation and fear. Miners leave offerings to the Lord of the Underworld, a devilish figure fashioned from stone or clay deep within the mine.
Ow.
To appease him is to seek protection, to pray that the mountain spares you for one more day. Cocoa leaves, alcohol, and cigarettes are offered to this horned figure in hopes that he will ward off disaster. When the day's labor ends, there is no true rest, only the brief respite before it begins anew. Hands stained with dirt and blood, faces aged beyond their years. Miners emerge to the cold night air, the stars sharp and distant in the Andean sky. Meals, when they come, are sparse. Perhaps a thin soup, some maize, or whatever could be bartered or begged, and yet life persists. Songs echo faintly among the laborers melancholic, yet defiant. There is a rhythm to their lives, however harsh, a pattern of toil, fear, and fleeting camaraderie. Even amid misery, bonds are formed, stories shared, and a stubborn endurance cultivated. As we step back from the oppressive depths of Cerro Rico, allow yourself to breathe deeply once again. The air is clearer up here, though it carries the faint memory of those who endured, suffered, and perished in the service of silver. But silver was not meant to stay buried forever. It traveled changing hands, crossing oceans, and shaping the fortunes of empires. Now that we have stood in the dim corridors of Cerro Rico, burdened by the weight of its walls and the suffocating air, let us ascend not just to the surface, but beyond. Let us follow the silver extracted at such a heavy cost, as it embarks on a journey that stretches far beyond the Andes, across seas and continents, linking distant lands in ways both visible and invisible. Imagine, if you will, the city of itself. In the 16th and 17th centuries, it was a metropolis unlike any other in the Americas. Sitting at the foot of the silver-rich mountain, became one of the wealthiest and most populous cities in the world, rivaling even the grand capitals of Europe. The sound of hammers and picks in the mines was mirrored by the bustling clamor of markets, workshops, and counting houses below. Silver, once extracted, was refined in facilities called ingenious, where the ore was ground and amalgamated with mercury in a laborious process known as the patio method. The mercury brought from the mines of Huancavelica, mixed with the silver dust to form a paste that could be separated, and then smelted into gleaming ingots or coined into the famous pieces of the Spanish dollar that would soon dominate global trade. From the cold heights of mule caravans would carefully navigate steep, treacherous paths, carrying the precious cargo towards the Pacific port of Arica or the Atlantic via Buenos Aires. Picture these caravans snaking through mountain passes, each step perilous, with silver secured in wooden chests, flanked by guards ever watchful for bandits or indigenous resistance. Upon reaching the coast, the silver was loaded onto galleons large, fortified ships designed to protect against pirates and privateers. The Spanish treasure fleets formed convoys that crossed the Atlantic, their sails full against the wind, the weight of empire in their holds. The destination, Seville, the heart of Spain's commercial network, where the silver would be registered, taxed, and distributed. But silver did not simply rest in Spain's vaults. It flowed like a great arterial river, funding wars, palaces, and the ambitions of kings. Spain was entangled in conflicts across Europe, the 80 Years' War in the Netherlands, the vast expenditures of the Habsburg Empire, the lavish courts of Madrid. The silver, from paid-for muskets, cannons, and mercenary armies, even as it funded the ornamentation of Baroque churches and the grandeur of royal ceremonies. Yet, the silver did not stay confined to Europe. Much of it was destined for the East, via another critical route, the Manila galleon trade. From the Americas, silver was shipped across the Pacific to the Spanish Philippines, to the bustling city of Manila. There it was exchanged for silks, spices, and most importantly, Chinese goods. China, during the Ming and Qing dynasties, had an insatiable appetite for silver. The Chinese economy had shifted to a silver standard for its currency, meaning that silver was in constant demand. European traders, lacking goods that truly interested the Chinese elite, found that Spanish silver was the key to unlocking the riches of the East. So imagine, if you will, a silver coin minted and stamped with the royal crest of Spain. That same coin might travel thousands of miles, change hands in a Manila market, and end up in the purse of a merchant in Canton or beneath the floorboards of a Chinese home. It might fund a war in Europe, adorn a church in Seville, or support a trade expedition across the Indian Ocean. The silver's journey was, in essence, the first true global economy, a web that linked the fates of miners in Bolivia, sailors in the Pacific, financiers in Amsterdam, and mandarins in Beijing. It was a gleaming thread that tied together distant lives, often invisibly, yet inexorably. Yet the wealth generated came with a hidden cost: human suffering in the mines. Environmental devastation from mercury pollution and social upheavals in the colonies and in Europe alike. The bounty of the mountain was not given freely. It was extracted, demanded, and paid for in blood and breath. As the silver flowed out of, so too did the stories, the hopes, and the despair of those who labored for it. Empires rose on these streams of wealth, but the mountain remained, indifferent and unyielding. And still, the mountain keeps its secrets. Beneath its slopes lie not just the bones of miners, but rumors of lost veins of silver, hidden chambers, and curses whispered by those who claim the mountain's hunger is never truly sated. As we leave behind the bustling trade routes and the glittering flow of silver that fueled empires, let us turn our gaze back to Cerro Rico, itself the mountain that eats men, and the mysteries it still holds beneath its weathered slopes. Imagine the mountain, shrouded in a gentle morning mist, the sun rising slowly over jagged peaks that have witnessed centuries of toil and tragedy. Its rocky face, pockmarked with ancient mine entrances and tunnels, seems almost alive, as if breathing softly with the memory of countless miners who vanished into its depths. From the earliest days of the Spanish conquest, tales began to circulate among the workers and locals, whispers of hidden veins of silver so rich and vast that they defied belief. Stories of lost chambers and secret shafts where the ore glittered like stars, untouched by the hand of man. These myths were fueled by the sheer scale of mining. As the easily accessible veins were exhausted, miners pushed deeper, often tunneling blindly into the dark labyrinth below. Many believed that the mountain itself was guarded by spirits, guardian deities, or curses set to punish greed and cruelty. Some miners claimed to hear eerie voices echoing in the tunnels, or to see flickering lights where no flame could burn. Others spoke of sudden collapses or inexplicable accidents that seemed to punish those who sought to plunder too greedily. Imagine the damp, narrow passageways deep underground, where the air grows thick and heavy with dust and the faint metallic scent of ore. Flickering lanterns cast long shadows on rough-hewn walls, and the constant drip of water echoes softly a lullaby of the mountain's hidden heart. Here it is easy to imagine the feeling of being watched, the weight of silence, and the unsettling presence of the unknown. Archaeologists and historians have explored many of these tunnels, uncovering tools, fragments of clothing, and the remains of miners whose lives were claimed by cave-ins or poisonous mercury fumes. Yet many passages remain unexplored or collapsed, swallowed by time and rock. It is said that some veins of silver have never been found, locked away in secret chambers, waiting silently beneath the earth. But the curse of is not just a matter of superstition. The mountain's relentless demand for labor, its dangerous conditions, and the environmental damage left behind have cast a long shadow on the region. Mercury, used in refining, seeped into the soil and water, leaving a toxic legacy that affects the landscape and people even centuries later. In the surrounding villages, the stories of lost mines blend with memories of hardship and resilience. The mountain stands as a constant reminder, a silent witness to the cycles of hope and despair, wealth and poverty. As night falls gently over and the stars emerge above the mountain's silhouette, one can almost hear the mountain's whispered stories, tales of dreams, dangers, and the enduring human spirit. Now, as we rise from the depths of these lost mines, we prepare to visit a very different world. The grand estates of the Spanish colonial elite. There, far from the mine's dark tunnels, life unfolds in luxurious abundance and stark contrast. As we leave the shadowed depths of Cerro Rico behind, imagine yourself traveling across the rugged Andean landscape toward the sprawling estates known as haciendas. These vast colonial plantations stretch out under open skies, their fields rich with crops like wheat, maize, and barley, tended by workers who labor from dawn until dusk. The hacienda is a world apart from the claustrophobic tunnels of the mines. Here the air is filled with the mingling scents of fertile earth, ripe fruit, and the smoke of cooking fires. Imagine the soft rustling of cotton and wool fabrics worn by overseers and estate owners as they stroll through their lands, their polished boots crunching gently on dry soil. Yet beneath this surface of calm and order, life on the hacienda is shaped by a strict hierarchy and harsh realities. The Spanish colonial elite, wealthy from silver and land, live in large adobe houses with thick walls and red-tiled roofs. Inside, rooms are cool and shaded, adorned with carved wooden furniture, woven tapestries, and the flickering light of oil lamps. Imagine a grand dining hall where long tables are laid with clay dishes and silverware, groaning under the weight of roasted meats, fresh bread, sweet fruits, delicacies that would be rare treats for the laborers outside. The air is filled with the murmur of conversation, the clink of cups filled with thick, dark chocolate or spiced wine. Despite the comforts enjoyed by the estate owners, The wealth of the hacienda depends heavily on the labor of indigenous peoples and enslaved workers. Picture rows of fields tended by hands roughened from toil, backs bent under the sun, and feet stained with the dust of the land. The rhythms of their work are punctuated by the calls of overseers and the steady beat of harvesting tools. Life for these workers is marked by routine and resilience. They rise early to tend crops, repair fences, and care for animals such as llamas and horses. Their meals are simple, often maize porridge or beans, eaten quickly before returning to their tasks. Though their days are long, communities form in the small villages near the haciendas, where families share stories, songs, and traditions passed down through generations. The hacienda is not only an agricultural hub, but also a center of political power and social life. Imagine the governor or wealthy landowner receiving visitors, other nobles, clergy, or colonial officials, discussing matters of trade, justice, and governance over lavish feasts. These gatherings are punctuated with music from lutes and flutes, and the subtle performances of poetry or storytelling. Yet beneath the elegance and ceremony, tensions simmer. The wealth of the elite contrasts sharply with the hardships of those who cultivate the land, reflecting the fragile balance of colonial society. The hacienda system, while prosperous, was built on inequalities that would echo through the centuries. As the evening sun sets gently behind the Andean peaks, the distant sound of livestock, the crackle of a hearth fire, and the whisper of night breezes create a lullaby that soothes the landscape. We have journeyed together through the depths of silver mines, across vast trade networks, and into the heart of colonial luxury. Now, as we prepare to close our tale, let your thoughts drift gently toward the comforts of your own time, a world far removed from the harsh rhythms and struggles of... Imagine waking before dawn, the horizon still tinged with a deep, soft blue. The air is already heavy with warmth, thick with the scent of dry earth and early dust. You are a farmer in medieval Maliwan among many, yet your daily rhythm is marked by hardship that few outside your village can truly understand. The land is generous, but demanding. Millet and sorghum fields stretch in rough patches, their stalks whispering faintly in the light breeze. You begin by repairing the cracked earth with simple tools, wooden hoes carved by your own hands or those of your family. The soil is dry and stubborn, needing patience and constant care. As the sun climbs higher, its rays become fierce, pressing down like an unyielding weight. Water is a precious resource drawn carefully from wells or the slow-moving Niger River. Irrigation is rudimentary, reliant on the rhythm of the seasons, and your knowledge passed down through generations. The rainy season, a blessing and a curse, brings both the life-giving floodwaters and the threat of destructive storms. When rains fail or arrive too late, famine looms, a constant specter in the lives of Mali's farmers. Yet it is not only the environment that weighs heavily on you. Imagine the slow passage of officials from distant towns, bearing the burdensome demands of tax collection. The empire's rulers, distant and unyielding, require a share of your harvest grain, livestock, or labor. This tribute is essential for maintaining the great cities, the armies, and the lavish courts. But for you, it means tightening your belt even further. Beyond taxes, the threat of slave raids casts a long shadow. Bands of raiders often sweep through border regions, capturing those left vulnerable. The fear of sudden violence, the quiet urgency to protect family and village, is woven into your daily thoughts. Walls are low and often made of mud. There are few weapons strong enough to defend against well-armed invaders. Despite these hardships, your life is not without moments of community and shared resilience. Imagine gathering with neighbors after a long day, sharing stories beneath the shade of baobab trees. Their massive trunks and branches offering a cool refuge. Children play nearby, their laughter a gentle reminder of life's persistence. The diet is simple, based mostly on what the land yields: millet, porridge, beans, wild fruits, and occasionally fish caught from the nearby river. Meals are humble and often shared with neighbors or family, eaten slowly to make the food last and to savor what little is available. Your clothing is made from hand-woven cotton, soft but faded from the sun, practical rather than decorative. Your skin is weathered from constant exposure, hands calloused from hoeing and planting. Each movement follows the steady rhythm of survival, constant unspoken dance between man, earth, and the seasons. As the sun sets and the sky softens to a deep orange, the village quiets. Fires flicker and smoke rises lazily into the cooling air. You prepare for rest, knowing the next day will bring much of the same a life of relentless labor beneath the same vast sky. The story of the farmer in medieval Mali is one of endurance, quiet strength, and a deep connection to the land-world apart from the riches that many imagine when they hear the name of this empire. Imagine now as the night deepens over the quiet villages and fields. The distant sound of a great caravan slowly stirring to life. This caravan is unlike any other. It carries Mansa Musa, the Emperor of Mali, whose wealth and influence would soon be whispered across continents. His journey is not only a pilgrimage, but a dazzling spectacle that reshaped the world's understanding of wealth and power. Mansa Musa's pilgrimage to Mecca in the early 14th century was a monumental event. Picture the emperor himself, tall and dignified. Draped in robes woven from fine silks, his presence commanding respect and awe. Surrounding him are thousands of attendants, soldiers, scholars, and servants, all moving with deliberate grace beneath the vast African sky. The caravan stretches for miles, laden with camels carrying enormous amounts of gold, food, and gifts. Imagine the soft, rhythmic footsteps of camels on sun-baked earth, the murmurs of the traveling scholars discussing sacred texts, and the occasional call of a distant bird as the procession winds its way across deserts and rivers. Mansa Musa's journey was not merely a religious obligation, but also a statement of Mali's grandeur. The gold he distributed along the route was so abundant that it caused inflation in the cities he passed through, creating ripples in economies as far away as Cairo and Damascus. Imagine the astonished faces of merchants and nobles receiving the gifts, and the whispered tales of the wealthiest man in the world traveling humbly, but regally through the lands. This pilgrimage also brought scholars and architects to Mali, who would later influence the development of great centers of learning like Timbuktu. The empire's reputation for wealth, knowledge, and piety grew with every step Mansa Musa took toward Mecca. Yet beneath the splendor, consider the vast networks of farms and villages like the ones you have just imagined, whose labor and tribute made such a journey possible. The richness of Mansa Musa's gold was built upon the toil of many farmers, miners, traders woven together in a complex web of empire. As the caravan disappears over the horizon, leaving behind stories that would be told for generations, you might feel a sense of calm wonder. The world is vast and full of connections, from humble fields to majestic courts, each part vital to the whole. Imagine yourself standing at the edge of a vast desert where golden sands stretch endlessly beneath a soft, hazy sky. Not far from here lies the ancient city of Timbuktu, once a bustling hub of knowledge and learning in medieval West Africa. In its prime, this city was a beacon of scholarship, its libraries filled with manuscripts that recorded centuries of thought, poetry, science, and history. Picture the quiet courtyards of Timbuktu, shaded by the soft rustle of date palms. Here, scholars would gather in calm conversation, the gentle scratching of reed pens on parchment filling the warm air. The scent of aged paper mixed with the earthiness of sun-baked clay walls surrounds you, inviting a slower, reflective mood. These manuscripts were precious treasures, carefully copied and preserved by hand. Imagine the delicate care taken to write each word, the patient hands dipping quills into ink, tracing letters with purpose and grace. The texts cover a wide array of subjects from astronomy and medicine to law and philosophy, reflecting a society deeply engaged with the world of ideas. But Timbuktu's libraries were not just storehouses of books. They were living centers of intellectual exchange. Picture scholars exchanging ideas in hushed tones, their robes softly brushing the sandy floors as they moved between study rooms and shaded courtyards. The rhythm of their lives was one of contemplation and learning, a quiet refuge from the harsher realities of the outside world. Over time, many of these manuscripts were lost to time, war, and the shifting sands of the desert. Yet some have survived, tucked away in hidden rooms and private collections, whispering stories of a civilization that valued knowledge as much as gold. Imagine yourself holding one such manuscript, pages fragile, the ink faded but still legible. Each letter, each diagram, a testament to the human desire to understand and preserve wisdom. It is a quiet, almost sacred connection across centuries. As you breathe in the stillness of this scholarly world, you might feel a gentle sense of peace, the soothing comfort of knowledge, quietly enduring through the ages. Now, imagine stepping away from the quiet sands and aged manuscripts and entering the grand halls of a Mali king's palace. The walls here are thick with the warm glow of oil lamps, casting soft light on intricate wooden carvings and colorful textiles. The air is rich with the scent of spiced meats, roasted grains, and sweet honey wines. A feast is underway. In this moment, you find yourself surrounded by music. The gentle plucking of a kora, a harp-like instrument, fills the room with a delicate melody. Nearby, the deep rhythm of talking drums beats steadily, inviting relaxed conversation and the occasional, cheerful laughter. The griot storytellers and historians begin to weave their tales, their voices calm and measured, recounting ancient legends and heroic deeds that have shaped Mali's rich history. Visualize the long tables laden with dishes, bowls of fragrant millet porridge, roasted goat meat glazed with aromatic spices, and sweet treats made from dates and nuts. The king and his courtiers sit comfortably, their garments shimmering with gold-threaded embroidery, yet their expressions remain dignified and composed. Here, wealth and power are displayed with restraint, in contrast to the stark lives of the farmers and the quiet scholars. Despite the luxury, there is a rhythm to this life, a careful balance maintained between celebration and responsibility. The music is steady, but not hurried. The food plentiful, but not excessive. The conversations drift softly from politics to poetry, philosophy to daily affairs, each word carefully chosen, each moment savored. As you imagine yourself seated among these noble guests, you might notice the gentle clinking of cups and the soft murmur of voices blending with the music. The palace itself feels alive yet serene, a space where the weight of leadership is momentarily eased by shared warmth and fellowship. Outside the palace walls, the rhythms of the empire continue the toiling fields. The restless desert winds, the silent libraries holding their precious knowledge. But here, within these walls, there is a soothing sense of order and tradition, a refuge from the harshness beyond. Take a deep breath and let the gentle sounds and scents of this feast lull you into a calm state. The contrast between the strenuous life of the farmer, the grandeur of the pilgrimage, the quiet study of manuscripts, and the soft glow of the palace banquet paints a full picture of medieval Mali's rich and complex world. As you settle into this peaceful moment, allow yourself to drift gently toward rest, carrying with you the soothing echoes of music and history. As we draw this tranquil journey to a close, imagine the vast expanse of the Malian landscape stretching out beneath a slowly darkening sky. The sun dips below the horizon, casting soft hues of amber and violet across the fields where farmers once labored under the relentless heat. Their hands, weathered and steady, shaped the land and life in a constant, patient rhythm. In the distance, the great caravan winds its way across the desert, laden with gold and goods, carrying stories and dreams to distant shores. The echoes of Mansa Musa's pilgrimage still ripple through time, a reminder of ambition, wealth, and the fragile dance of power and faith. Within the silent, dust-covered libraries of Timbuktu, countless pages rest quietly, whispering of knowledge once vibrant and alive. They remind us that even in harsh conditions, human curiosity and wisdom endure, preserved like flickering candlelight in the stillness. And in the grand halls of the king's palace, the soft strumming of the kora fades into the night, mingling with gentle laughter and the peaceful closing of another day. This is a world of contrasts, the scorching heat and the cool shadows, the toil and the celebration, the forgotten and the remembered. As you lie here now, let the quiet strength of these stories settle softly around you, like a comforting blanket woven from the threads of history. Allow your breath to deepen, your muscles to relax, and your mind to drift gently into sleep. The past, with all its complexity and calm, is always here, a soothing companion for your rest. Thank you for joining this journey through medieval Mali. May your dreams carry you softly, wrapped in the gentle rhythms of a world both distant and familiar. Good night.